born to be kings. We're the princes of the universe. How you guys doing? Sorry about yesterday. I lost my voice. I'm still recovering. I just gotta rest more, man. I gotta rest more. Anytime I go, like, I went to a party on Sunday evening, and it was fun. I had a really, really good time, but, like, I gotta go easier, dude. I gotta go easier. I gotta slow down. I'm old. I'm old. And then this morning I went to an ODSP rally, and I think my big takeaway from it was twofold. I've been going to ODSP rallies over and over again. This was the largest so far. Really nice turnout, which is encouraging. It's good to see that people are starting to put two and two together and like be like, okay, you know, maybe we actually should show up to these things. Like maybe we actually should take the energy into the streets. Like it's what needs to happen, which we're seeing from the CUPE strike, and we're going to be talking about the CUPE strike as we go along, because how can you ignore it? How many people showed up? Oh God, I didn't do like a count, but it was over 30, like 30 to 40. Like it was over that for sure. And the second thing that really convinced me that, and like, you got to remember, like ODSP people, it's hard. Like it's really difficult for people who are on disability to show up at a fucking rally. Like it's really difficult for these people to actually get, like, just from point A to point B, just to actually get out into a rally, just to actually go, right? Like, so, like, I have a lot of sympathy, and it shows a lot of heart, and it shows a lot of conviction that people are starting to gather and people are starting to show up. And it's also showing a lot of desperation, frankly, and we need to be more desperate than we are now. Like, to me, it's obscene. It's obscene what's happening to the disabled in this province. It's obscene what Doug Ford is doing. And if you see what he's doing to the striking workers now, the CUPE workers, you can see what's going to happen, right? Like, if that's how he's going to treat workers, like, how do you think he's going to treat the disabled, right? Like, how do you think he's going to treat these people? And so, as I've been saying all along, it's all about just getting into the streets, getting more energy around these issues, getting more focus, getting more conversation, because it's the only way the ball's going to move, right? If it was up to these guys, we'd all just be slaves, like, period. Like, if it was up to these guys, we would just be owned as slaves, as property. They would just reinstate slavery if it was 100% up to them. And that's the way of it. Cotton, a little early on the number call, Cotton. Broccoli cheddar rice, good to see you. Good to see you. And so, the other thing that was really stark was that Mike Schreier, who's the Green Party representative, he was there from the beginning. He was holding a sign. He was helping out where he could help out. He was listening to everybody, right? He was really there for it. Really changed my opinion of him. Really changed my opinion of him. My opinion of the federal and Green Party is that it's a disaster. A party not worth a goddamn. But Mike Schreier, his participation at this particular rally really changed my opinion of him as a person, that I'd be willing to support him as a candidate if this is how he's going to act, because actions say a lot. And it was very, very telling, because at about noon, the NDP come out on their lunch break, right? The NDP party that's in the House. So it's like 20 people. They come out, and they basically ignore the rally, right? They kind of gather around the back of it. They just mill about talking to each other, right? They essentially ignore what's going on. They ignore the speaker. There's a blind woman who they've been trying to get to this rally for like 3 different rallies now, and finally she's able to make it out to this one. And the entire time she's telling her story, the NDP are in the back laughing and giggling amongst each other like school children. We literally have to like shush them down, and they don't listen to us because they're not listening. They're not paying attention to what's going on around them because they don't actually care. And then after she finishes, the NDP all gather behind the podium for their little photo op. They make a speech about how much they actually care, and then they leave. That's the NDP as far as I'm concerned. These people are detached, disconnected. They are not paying attention to what's going on in the world, nor do they care to. Nor do they care to. It's all just glad handing and photoshops for the NDP now, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that they're connected to the workers. I don't think they're connected to workers' movements. I don't think they're certainly not connected to the disabled. They certainly don't give a fuck. As far as they're concerned, this was just like a little photo op for them so that when the news runs, because what's going to happen, right? Even if they tell a news story about this, because there was only City News was the only organization that was actually there, and even if they run, what are they going to do? There's going to be like a little clip of the NDP representative talking. They're not going to tell any of the stories from anybody else. So the NDP basically just came in, said, I guess you're here. Here's a little speech for you, and took all the oxygen out of the room and fucked off. I thought it was disgraceful. I thought that they acted, anybody who's pretending like they're a party worth supporting is fooling themselves. If that's the way they're going to treat people, they're just going to come in, ignore us, right? I think it's just fucking bullshit. John, is Compton Carite cheating? I think it's evident. Run a poll, permanent lifetime chat ban, or permanent. I'm not going to do any of that. Even if I found out. Even if I found out Compton. If I found out that Compton was cheating 100%, that it was just dead to rights, evidence in front of me, I couldn't deny it, I still wouldn't ban you over it. I don't give a fuck. Cheat. I don't care. Like, who gives a shit? Honestly, I think the only thing that it would mean is that I would be like, that's a little sad. I'd feel that's all I would say about it. If I found out that somebody was cheating about the David Lynch ball draw thing that we do sometimes, I'd be like, oh, bunny. Like, you don't need to... Why are you cheating at that? Oh. Alright, this is a disorganized mess. I definitely did not take the time to organize any of this. So it's just going to be a hodgepodge of nightmare disasterness. Absolutely. Matthias, good to see you. Making work optional doesn't mean people won't work. They'll just be able to have more leverage in their pay/schedule. Well, and honestly, like... I'm more or less of the opinion that if work was optional, that what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with people doing work because they want to. You're going to end up... Because, like, what are people going to do? Like, the whole narrative of, like, people are just going to sit around... No, they're not. Like, no, they're not. I think that... That's some... Like, I really started to understand that the people who own the society have pudding for brains and are babies... when they started saying people will just sit around. That's when I really came to realize, like, oh, you're actually, like, a legit, like, you've never grown up. You're a 6-year-old at best. Like, that's where your mind is at. I think that that's just fundamentally true. I think that I think that the rich people are children. Like, that they're just whining and crying and telling everybody how great they are. Like, that's all they're doing. And if you were to build a society that doesn't rely on them, right? That's not what they want because they're babies, right? And they're like, but you depend on me. I'm important. It's like, no, you're fucking not. You're a little baby. Go sit in the corner. And if we actually made a society where the necessities of life were actually taken care of, then I think we would find out as a people fairly quick what people actually value, right? I think that our values would be realigned. And the idea that people would stop working is like, yeah, people would stop working at the shit that nobody wants to do because it's stupid, right? Like, yeah, oh no, HMV might struggle to find workers, right? Or places that are abusive to their staff might have trouble to find workers, right? Oh no, McDonald's is gonna struggle. Oh no, you know? Like, oh, shitty places that probably shouldn't exist in the first place will struggle to find workers. Yeah, great, perfect, fantastic. Isn't that a win? Isn't that like an absolute slam dunk, absolute, like, yeah, hooray? Like, if you're standing there saying, like, no, people should be so desperate that they have to take jobs that are terrible for society, then I think that there's something wrong with you. Like, really, just straight up, I think you need to, like, go take a look at yourself and take a look at the mirror and really be like, wow, I genuinely want people to be so desperate that they're forced to take, like, slave labor-style jobs or be denigrated by society to such a degree that their self-worth just evaporates. Hey, Lou, how you doing, bud? Like, no, here you go. I would absolutely sit around and not do any work other than the work I would do, right? Like, sorry, dude. Like, people do this all the time. It happens all the time. I have this conversation at least once a week these days. I absolutely would just sit around and do nothing, except, that other thing that I really like, and that thing. Oh, that other thing I haven't been able to find any time to do, and that thing there. Yeah, and that other thing. It happens constantly. Everybody always says it, and I'm always like, no, you wouldn't. Like, you really would not sit around and do nothing. Like, you'd get bored of it. Your ass would get sore. And also, like, and then finally, you guys know me. What's my favorite thing to do in these kinds of conversations? Concede the point. Okay, so you're just going to sit around and do nothing. Well, we already pay people to do that. They're called prisoners, right? So instead of saying, hey, go do a crime, and then you can sit around and do nothing, you can just choose to voluntarily sit around and do nothing. That's fine. I don't know why this is such a, like, people will just sit around and do nothing, as if it's, like, the worst thing that could ever happen. If that's the worst case scenario for these people, then, okay. Like, it's so small scale and so babyish in its concern. Like, my concern is that people are going to starve in the streets and be homeless. Like, oh no. Oh no. Someone's comfortable on a couch? Oh! These people are essentially admitting to your face that they're fascists. Right? If you make it so that people don't die in the streets of exposure, then they might sit comfortably on a couch. Like, that's actually legitimately the point that they're making. Like, really, when you think about it. It's like, oh, I can't force suffering on people? Damn, they might be comfortable and live a decent life. Drapped. Like, it's the deeper you get into what it is they're actually saying, the more you realize that these people are Nazis. Like, they are getting off on the suffering of others, and the idea of someone just being comfortable is abhorrent to them. Like, that's what they're telling you. They're saying it to your face. Right? They're saying it right to your face. Like, I don't know what these guys need to do to convince you that they're just fascists. Like, I don't know what they need to do. Yeah, thank God Lula won, right? I've got a story. It's buried in all this nonsense. Hold on. I got it. It's coming. I promise. It's coming. This one can actually go. Go away. Okay, great. No, this one can go away because it's dumb. No, it's more. This is more. Yes, okay, I did it. Lula beats Bolsonaro in Brazil, dealing huge blow against fascist politics. This is actually a really, really big deal. And it's a really, really big deal once you... No, they're not going to do it. As time moves forward, I'm sure somebody will actually do a better job of what I'm about to do. Google Maps. Which is point out how many countries in South America have elected socialist governments, right? The first spearhead was really Venezuela, and Venezuela was the one that experienced a lot of coup attempts, assassination attempts, a collapse of their government, and they've managed to stand strong, showing the strength of socialism when under attack. We know that other countries now, and I'm going to make an idiot of myself because I'm pretty, like, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, yeah, the birthplace of neoliberalism, Chile. please, and if I'm wrong about any of these, feel free to correct me in the chat, because I'm just doing this off the top of my head. But someone is going to sit down and be like, yeah, like these guys have all gone socialist. So there's a huge socialist swing that's been happening throughout the South American countries already. And Brazil swinging in that direction at this moment, at this time, is actually a huge fucking deal. And the reason why I think it's a really, really, really big fucking deal is, hey, Demand Better, how you doing, bud? We'll definitely be talking about what you're talking about, dude. The reason why I think it's a really big deal is because those socialist countries have been talking about a federated body. They've been talking about getting together and creating a larger federation of socialist countries that in order to protect themselves from the neo-Nazis that exist on the world stage, right? Like, all these guys are looking at what happened in Chile and Venezuela and all these, like, all of their countries have been under attack by America the whole time. And they're not looking at America as like a buddy, right? Like, they're not looking, like, they're looking at America as like a dangerous psychopath they have to interact with. And so for them, I think they're looking at each other and basically being like, okay, well, I think if we band together, we'll be stronger and put together a stronger united front against this overt, crazed, foaming at the mouth psychopath. And Brazil swinging in that direction, while these groups are trying to create federated bodies, could introduce Brazil into that federated body. And then also, Brazil has already been swinging towards China and swinging towards the more BRICS style system. It's already been trying to disconnect itself from the American system, even under Bolsonaro, right? Even Bolsonaro was looking at America being like, yeah, that's probably not going to last for much longer. And I think that under Lula that's just going to accelerate. And I hope good things happen for Brazil. Honestly, I hope good things happen for Brazil. I hope we start getting really good stories. I hope they stop clear-cutting the rainforest, right? I hope they start actually giving a shit about things like climate change. I hope they start actually giving a shit about things like people, you know? Like, I hope they actually start configuring a society that actually gives a shit about one another. That would be cool. I'd love to go down to visit Brazil. That's what I'd really love. Go down and visit Brazil. Yeah, you shouldn't have to work for basic needs. The system we have now doesn't accomplish that. Yeah, and that's by design. That's by design. They're not interested in providing needs. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. They're interested in creating desperate workers. That's what they're interested in doing. You can see that with the CUPE thing, which I feel like we're just about to get into. Because Demand Better, conservatives love government overreach as long as it's their guys doing it. They have no principles as long as they support corrupt criminals like Ford and weasel liars like PP, yeah? Libcons need to get out of power, the left of center needs to build an alliance, and the socialists need to take over the NDP and Greens. Yeah, that's straight up the truth. That's straight up the truth. Like, if they'll let it happen, right? Like, corporate power has become so entrenched and so overwhelming that, I mean, I think we should try. Like, I think we should try. But I don't think we should try with the expectation that we'll be successful. Like, we should try with the expectation that what we're doing is showing the country how fraudulent the system is. That would be what I would say about that. Like, I am not against the idea of people continuing to pursue electoral politics and attempting to get involved in electoral politics and getting into electoral politics and trying to get voted into office. All that. Like, all that. I'm going to stand here and be like, great. More power to you. Never do it with the expectation that you will win and take power. Because the corporate power structure will literally assassinate people before that starts happening. Like, I'm in a no bullshit place with these psychopaths. Like, if a legit socialist who refuses to be bought out starts to ascend the ranks and starts to get into a position where they might actually win an election, they will have an accident. That's what will happen, right? And eventually it'll just get to the point where they'll just shoot you in the streets. And just be like, well, what are you going to do about it? You know, like they've already done these things. We just don't say it. We just don't. For some reason, we pretend like what they did to Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton is just not going to happen again. Like, yeah, obviously it's what's going to happen. Like, that's what they're going to do. These people are raving, foaming at the mouth, serial killer psychopaths. That is the path that they are on. And the reason why I tell people, like, don't get into electoral politics with this idea that you're going to win, is because if that's what you have in your mind, if that's the goal that you have, then you're constantly going to be demoralized. You're constantly going to be put into a state of depression. You're constantly going to be losing, because you're going to be losing. You're going to face a lot of losing. And if your thought pattern is, and we'll win, and we'll get power, and move on, and all that kind of stuff, then you're just going to, like, you're going to shoot yourself in the face. You're going to commit suicide. Like, it's going to be real bad for you, right? But if your objective is different than that, if your objective, and so I say, your objective should be an understanding that you're simply trying to show people how fraudulent the system of capital actually is. Like, that's what I say. That the system of electoral politics is fraudulent. That what happened in BC alone, right? Forget about the multiple other things, but what happened in BC alone, where literally, like, a young lady does exactly what we just talked about. She gathered all the forces, she got energy, she was gonna win the seat, and oh man, and then go up and actually be a climate justice, and they just literally were like, no. They just literally said no. Like, they literally just said no. So, like, that's where we're at. Where, like, the NDP and the Liberals and the Conservatives, if you actually come in and you actually gather strength and power, they'll just say no. Right? That the owners have the final say. And that's what we should be doing. We should be doing that kind of thing to continuously show people the system is fraudulent. The only way we're actually going to move the ball is if we surround the halls of power. There's literally nothing else to do. Like, there's literally nothing else to do. The idea that you're going to vote NDP and they're actually going to give a fuck about you. Yeah, they don't give a fuck. They don't care. I saw that black and white in front of me today. The NDP do not give a shit. Lulu Livre, I'm a few minutes behind, so this comment may not make any sense as posted. That's fine, demand better. I'm just glad you're here, bud. I hope things are going well for you out in the world. And this is, like, objectively good news. Like, Lula was a good leader when he was in power the first time. He was dealing with a harder situation than he is now. Like, the neoliberal capitalist forces that exist in his country still exist, but they're not as well positioned as they were in the past. And I also think that he's going to get a lot of international support. I think that the first time that he was in power, China was not where it is now, right? The first time that he is, the first time he was in power, the BRICS network wasn't going. The Belt and Road Initiative was really just beginning. Like, it really pays to remember how fast the Belt and Road Initiative got put up. Like, China's industriousness has really embarrassed the West in a big way. In a way that I don't think the West can recover from, in all seriousness. Like, if China keeps building that fast, that much, like, think where they'll be in another 10 years, right? Like, when I'm 50, China's going to have, like, entire new rail systems erected, and, like, Africa will be covered, right? Like, it's crazy what China is doing and how fast they're doing it. And how embarrassing the West looks in the face of it. Oh, wait, what happened today? I said at the beginning, I went to an ODSP rally, and the NDP, so the Green Party representative, Mike Schreier, was there the whole time, holding a sign, helping people out, listening to what everybody had to say, really participating in what was happening, which I really valued. I got to tell you, I'm very impressed that somebody who has stood on the debate stage and is running as the premier of this province actually goes to these ODSP rallies, actually listens, and actually participates. And so while that's happening, the NDP come out of their little castle that they're all in with all their foofy hair, they're all wearing their poppies, so you all know who they are, right? And they go behind all of the people who have been at this rally in the rain the whole time, and they just chitter amongst one another, right? Just chittering and talking, right? Not even listening to the person who's at the podium, right? There's a blind woman speaking about her life's experience dealing with disability and ODSP standing at the podium, and these guys are all giggling amongst one. People like Joel Harden, right? All just laughing and giggling amongst one another. They don't give a fuck what she has to say. They don't give a fuck about this rally, right? For them, it's just the cameraman. There's just one cameraman they care about, and that's City TV. And then once she's done talking, all the NDP gather behind the podium so that the cameraman can take his stupid shot, so that when they put it on the news, if they put it on the news, they can get 5 seconds of some NDPer being like, we care about the ODSP. And then once it was over, they all just fucking left and went back in the castle. Like, get completely fucked. Get completely fucked, NDP. You don't give a shit about people on ODSP. You don't give a shit about disabled people. These are just leverage tokens for you. These are just things that you use for political leverage to be like, vote for me. Head tilting, aw. And when they get into power, they'll raise ODSP by 2.4% or whatever, right? They don't give a fuck, and it's obvious. It's obvious to anyone who has eyes. Were there any blue and yellow poppies? No. Do the blue and yellow poppies mean something? Am I out of the loop on blue and yellow poppies? Adam, I don't think your ban attempt was very genuine. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to call you out on that. They're saying they're not going to allow CUPE to protest. Yeah, the truckers had the Emergency Act. Yeah. It's only a matter of time before surrounding the halls of power and protest is illegal. Now, to that point, Trudeau has condemned Ontario government's intent to use the notwithstanding clause in worker legislation. So there's that. Like, that's something, at least, that the very person who used the Emergency Measure Act against the Freedom Convoy truckers is now condemning the Ontario government's intent to use the notwithstanding clause in this case. And the statements that he's made, like, Trudeau's not really a table pounder, right? Like, he's not going to sit there and be like, but it's here, hold on, is my sound correct? Hold on, because there's a clip here, and I'll just play it for you guys. Yeah, let's get this set up right. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, this will be good. This is the clip that's been circulating everywhere. Play, damn you. Play! I can't play. Is it gonna do it? No, it's not gonna do it, because fuck all of us, eh? Fuck all of us. Who wants to hear from the Prime Minister of Canada? Fucking nobody, that's who. I gotta clear some of this shit up. This is all just... yeah, this can go away. Yeah, this doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm like super fucking disorganized today, guys. Here we go.
Using the notwithstanding clause to suspend workers' rights is wrong. I know that collective bargaining negotiations are sometimes difficult, but...
Doesn't he just sound like a Ponzi dickhead? Like, I just cannot help it. I cannot help but listen to this guy. Even when he's saying something that I ostensibly agree with, I'm just like, God, you're such a Ponzi dickhead. Like, he doesn't actually care about this. Like, it's so clear that he doesn't actually care about this, that he just knows that this is his position, that this is what he's been told he needs to say, right, to maintain sort of his credibility in the position. But this is what he is saying. And maybe he's just a Ponzi douchebag. I mean, it's just as simple as that sometimes.
Using the notwithstanding clause to suspend workers' rights is wrong. I know that
little smirk.
Collective bargaining negotiations are sometimes difficult, but it has to happen. It has to be done in a respectful, thoughtful way at the bargaining table. The suspension of people's rights is something that you should only do in the most exceptional circumstances. And I really hope that all politicians call out the overuse of the notwithstanding clause to suspend people's rights and freedoms.
Not that he's going to do anything about it. And look at this smile he gives right at the end. He always does this. This is his "we're done here" smile. This is Justin Trudeau's "we're finished here." Question over. He always does this. It's so well refined and it's so well perfected. He does this little squinch, right? You can see him do it. Let's watch him do it, right? At the end of the sentence, look at him do the little squinch, where he squinches his face and does like a little squinch.
All politicians call out the overuse of the notwithstanding clause to suspend people's rights and freedoms.
Squinch, right? You saw it? You saw the squinch? Now that I've pointed it out, all you'll see is the little squinch from now on, forever. See if I can get there it is, the squinch. He does it all the time. All the time. And but, I mean, if you were to read what he had just said, right? If you were to read what he had just said, it's a clear position, right? Like he's taking a very clear stance. He says that it's wrong, that it shouldn't be done. However, my statement is, well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it, Justin? What are you going to do about it? You gonna get the lawyers? You gonna go to war? You gonna send anybody to Queen's Park? You gonna tell Ford that he can't do it? You gonna wrangle anything? You gonna fight for anybody? What are you gonna do about it? Oh, fuck all? Well, at least you said it was wrong. Because that's basically what he's gonna do, right? He's basically just gonna be like, that was wrong. La, 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 la. And just move on with the rest of his life. Apparently, David Eby, yet the newly appointed BC NDP leader, is trying to keep the party from ripping apart by ending fossil fuel subsidies and doing several other parts of Appadurai's platform, which just goes to show that supporting leftists over centrists is always worth it, no matter how badly the system is rigged. I mean, good. No, I don't think this David Eby person is a legitimate leader. Like, if he becomes the premier, I will always call him the illegitimate leader of the he literally despises democracy, and he despises the system that he's in. Like, he literally despises it. There's no reason to get behind fascists, even if they're doing concession bargaining, right? Like, there's no reason to. So, somebody who is looking at, like, basically just said no thank you to having a fight in the thing, right? He is a fascist. He should be called a fascist. What he did was fascism. There's no reason to describe it any other way. And if what he did is going to tear his own party apart, good. Good. That tells me that there's at least some people in the NDP who actually give a shit about things like democracy and actually give a shit about things like the survival of the species, right? That shows me that there's at least some kind of common sense in the party somewhere, right? But what it's going to mean is that the fascists are going to do what they do, which is just concessions bargaining, right? So that they can maintain power to ensure that you just keep going to work. You just keep going to work. What concession do you need? What concession do you need to make sure that you just keep going to work? Because that's what it's all about. I don't want to do any work. I accuse other people of being lazy bastards and sitting around while I float off to Jeffrey Epstein's sex island, right? That's what I'm doing. Like, that's what the fucking oligarch is doing, right? Someone like David Eby doesn't want to do any work. He wants to sit in an office and get a blowjob from an intern, right? Answer a phone or something. Talk to somebody and be like, I'm a very important person. That's what David Eby wants to do, right? So I hope he's destroying his party. I hope that the NDP literally collapse. I hope that an opposition party erects itself by saying exclusively, we actually care about democracy. And everybody goes, yeah, these guys actually vote for people. And the BC NDP collapse into dust. I hope that's what happens. Because they're fascists. Because they're fascists, or at least they're led by fascists. Like, overt, obvious, foaming at the mouth, rapacious, like wild-eyed, crazed fascists. And if the party collapses into dust, great. Good. I will be so happy to see that happen. Fuck these people. fuck every single one of them. And honestly, if I was part of the NDP and I saw that happening, I'd be bailing. I'd be going anywhere else. Like, literally, where's the Greens? Where's the Green Party? Let's go. Let's go. Like, split that party in half. Destroy it, because it doesn't exist anymore. Their decision to override the democratic process that exists within their own caucuses and appoint some fascist instead of electing anybody, it's like, that's the end of that party. It's not a party anymore, right? Like, it's just a weird little petty fiefdom. It's just a weird little dictatorship. I'm not participating in it, and I don't know why anybody in the party would. Get the fuck out. Start something new. And if it destroys the party, perfect. Perfect. I'm fine with that. Like, don't support fascism, kids. Yeah. I love how he frames the issue. He's not an absolutist about a statement. All it takes is for shit to get real. Like, I mean, he says that it's wrong, but, like, he's just not going to do anything about it. He's just not going to do anything about it. His policies exacerbated the inflation that makes everyone wage... that's not really true, honestly, C.R. Strifey. Like, nothing that Trudeau has done has affected inflation one way or the other. Because Trudeau hasn't done anything about it. Because we all know what inflation is. Inflation is just corporations raising prices. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of, like, losers, like the Westons and the Thompsons, who are just born billionaires, right? Who have never succeeded at anything in their life. They've never done anything worthwhile, right? They literally were just handed a golden chalice that they pee in. Like, that's all they are. They're the biggest losers in the society, and they own everything. And so they want to raise prices, and so prices are going up. That's what's happening. Very, very straightforwardly. And nothing Trudeau has done one way or the other has affected it. And that's what we should be condemning him for. His inaction. His inability to actually confront the death cult. That's what Trudeau is. He does a little squinchy face, and we're all supposed to be like, he actually cares. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't give a fuck. Yeah, I believe Trudeau cares about the same as the rest of the multimillionaire politicians across all parties. Bourgeois have their kids in private schools. Just another thing that won't affect them. Yeah, exactly. Just another thing that won't affect them, right? And, like, most of these rich cocksuckers are just going to be like, you should be talking to them, Yeah, it's pretty aggressive what you're doing. That's it. But they're never going to do anything about it. They're never actually going to stand up. They're never actually going to fight for the workers. They're never actually going to say that, hey, no, like they're never going to get in the way of these fascists, right? Like that's why liberalism is ultimately a failure and why it doesn't ultimately work. Because all it does is it sets the table for fascists, and when the fascists come and eat, the liberals make way. That's what it is. They don't ever stand their ground. They don't ever actually grow a spine. Like, spineless liberal is a well-known term for a reason. And it's true. Like, because at the end of the day, the liberals and the fascists work together, right? They're allies. That the liberals are just the silk-clothed hand that pats your head and say, of course we'll let you have a rainbow flag. Absolutely. Oh yeah, Black Lives Matter. Absolutely. Your work starts at 9 though, right? That's what it and if the worker starts to get uppity and starts to grow a bigger spine than the liberals, which isn't hard to do, well, then the liberal will just go, oh dearie me. Oh dearest me. You don't wish to support me, your good liberal friend? Well, then that would mean that the conservatives will get in. Then the camera turns to this guy who's just like, everything you have is just government handouts. You're a lazy, slovenly loser. And I'm going to destroy everything. Everything you own, dear. Then I cut back to the liberal, and the liberal just goes, you wouldn't want that, would you? no, that wouldn't be good for anyone. Like, they're friends. They work together. Like, it's an obvious good cop, bad cop grift that's obviously happening in front of you every single fucking day. Every single fucking day. So they're both fascists, right? They both don't care if fascists get into power and destroy everybody. Doesn't matter to them, because the fascists aren't going to go after someone like Trudeau, right? Like, JJ, I don't know if you've ever seen me. I don't know if I've ever seen you in the chat, but this is me. This is how I talk. Tune in. Like, we are completely owned by a system, and just like an antidote for my own personal life, I've been talking a little bit about this, and I'm never going to give names or anything, but I'm watching people come to grips with this. I'm watching people who have lived most of their professional life dealing with the owner dynamic pretty close to it. They've never been an owner, but they're always working with the owner, you know? That the owner is in the establishment, that the owner is working as the owner works, and that they have always been in kind of a position of respect. Sure, they're owned, and sure, they're a servant, but they're a respected servant, and their opinion matters, right, to them. And now they're in a position where their opinion doesn't matter. They're a worker, and they should do what they're told. We're the owners. We're going to do what we want, and you do what you're told. And I'm watching them deal with this. And I'm watching them see, and I'm seeing these people recognize what it is to be in this system and to live under this dynamic. And it's hard. It's hard to watch good people recognize what's happened to them. And I don't know that they're going to tolerate it. They may move on, which would be a huge loss, a massive loss to the place that I work. But that's what it is. I'm the guy you said that you hate Twitter on TikTok. I'm a dirty Twitter commie. Well, I'm glad to see you, JJ. And I'm glad to see that my Twitter videos are actually driving people here. Fantastic. It worked. Hey, everybody. The thing I did worked once. Hey, everybody. The thing I did that worked one time. I hope it keeps working a lot. I hope it keeps working a lot. And I become internationally famous. Yeah, internationally famous. I hope that Appadurai joins the Eco-Socialist Party and allies with the Green Party to destroy the Green NDP. Yeah, fuck the BC NDP. Fuck this fascist organization. As I think an alliance as the signal people need to bail on the NDP if they ever will. You know, it's a good idea though. Like, it is. Like, get like an Eco-Socialist Party, ally with the Green Party, right? Most of the people who went over to the NDP underneath that thing, like a huge group of people, were the Green Party, right? And I just think that there's, wherever this Appadurai goes, like wherever she goes, people should follow. And at the end of, like, and she really should be saying, let's give the NDP the election they avoided. There's got to be a better way of saying that. Like, there's got to be a better slogan, but that's the heart of it. Like, they didn't want to run against me, but they're going to run against me anyway. Right? Like, that's the narrative. Like, straight up go WWE with it, man. Like, these pussy NDP, they disqualified me because they were too afraid of the heat that I was bringing. Well, then I went away, and I was the defeated hero. I fell down, but on the hero's journey, the hero arises from the ashes, and I gathered my forces around me, and now, NDP, I'm here to throw down in an election that you can't avoid. Yeah, that's absolutely what she should do. With the voice and everything. With the voice and everything. I highly recommend it. Appadurai, if you're listening to me right now, lean into the Macho Man Randy Savage. It's good. You're going to win an election that way. I promise. So, moving on. Moving on to other things. No, not yet. Lots of people are responding to We'll talk about the war bonds for Nazi-infested Ukrainian government. Like, even the Globe and Mail, right? Like, even the Globe and Mail, which is David Thompson, right? So the wealthiest Canadian. So the wealthiest Canadian is going, Ontario's bill to stop CUPE strike unprecedented? You know, like, it's a bit like, we shouldn't probably lean all the way into this, right? Shouldn't probably... She's sticking with them? Fuck you. Fuck you, dude. Are you kidding me? Why? Why? Unless she's thinking like Bernie Sanders, like, I'll be destroyed otherwise. What a weak ass move. Like, what a little bitch move. Sorry, like, it's like what a weak, like, really sad, kind of pathetic move. Oh, you disqualified me for running for the leadership, but we're buds still, right? Like, no, rip that party in half. Tear that shit. Grab the people who will go with you and leave. Like, it just they're gonna keep doing that shit. They're never gonna let you lead that party. Like, they'll literally put a bullet in your back before they do that. A socialist party that works inside and outside the system and concentrates on building through mutual aid could be a game changer. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the dream. You guys all know my opinion on that. Like, working inside the system should be done exclusively to show the fraudulence of that system. Like, you're never going to win power. Like, that's not going to happen. But, like, showing that it's fraudulent will help build power outside of the system. Christ, that sounds like Macho Man Hollywood Hogan. Yeah, brother. Yeah, brother. Yeah, brother. Ontario Federation of Labour calls the Ford government's new legislation invoking the notwithstanding clause a full frontal attack on basic labor freedoms. Eric, good to see you, bud. Look, this is war. Like, I don't think I said it so clearly in today's video, but, like, it's the truth. Like, if the other unions, the teachers union and the rest of them, I don't know why I keep the nurses union, the doctors union, if they do not recognize this for what it is, like, if they do not see that this is a full frontal attack on basic labor freedoms, if they do not understand that this is war and that the battle lines must be drawn now, and if they don't understand that a general strike is what is on the table here, if they don't get that, then it's over. It's over. Like, because the Ford government will happily roll over the CUPE workers. Happily. Like, absolutely. He will have no problem whatsoever sending waves of cops at them, beating them up, putting them into the back of vehicles, evoking whatever legislation he wants to evoke in order to do it, right? Putting people in chains, putting whatever fine he wants them, bankrupting them. He's completely fine with doing all of this. Everything I just listed is on the table. That's the plan. So if the nurses unions and the doctors unions and the teacher unions, because God knows the police union isn't going to stand up, if these unions don't actually stand up, this is what is going to happen. And it can go down that way. Like, let's not fucking fool ourselves. It 100% can go down that way. Like, what have I been saying on this channel for like a year now? We already are a fascist society. That our rulers have yet to rule openly. Like, they're yet to just become nakedly fascist. But they are fascists, right? They just want to continue wearing the smiling face. They want you to keep believing that when they come out and smile, and when they come out and do all that kind of stuff, that they're honest and genuine. And they're not. They're not, right? And eventually it's going to be the Nazi salutes, guys. Like, eventually it's going to be shit like that. Eventually we're going to see just naked Nazism and naked fascism directly in front of us with a power structure that says, what are you going to do about it? And that moment can be now. That moment can be now, right? That moment can be now. Because if the Ford government just rolls over these people, takes their right to strike away from them, beats them up with cops, lays millions of dollars worth of fines on them, bankrupts their union, Like, what do you need? Like, what do you need? The only level above that is literally concentration camps. Like, literally. What's the level above that? Where do you even go from there? It's like breaking up a strike with cops and putting people in paddy wagons and destroying a union and fining people and fining workers and all of this kind of stuff. What's the next level? Like, so we have to choose. I know where I would choose, right? And my hope and my prayer, and what I think about all the time, is that I hope the doctors union and the nurses union and the teachers union and like the plumbers union and the electricians union, the firemen's union, and all of these unions come out and join the front line, because they are also being threatened by this. Because the end result of all of this is, if they watch the destruction of the CUPE workers union, right? Well, the Ford government is just going to say no to them forever. And they know exactly what will happen to them if they stand up. And if they don't stand up for the CUPE, then they're not going to stand up for each other, and they know it. And the entire union system collapses. Because if the unions won't back each other, why even have them? And all it will take is just one fat fascist saying no to them. Like, so the real question is, are we pathetic? Are we pathetic losers who can't stand up against one fat, demented idiot? Or do we have any amount of backbone whatsoever? And are we willing to actually fight for any of this kind of shit? Right? That's what it is. And we're going to see. We're going to see. We're going to watch this province either collapse into fascism or have the fascism thrown away. That's what we're going to watch. Those are the two narratives that are on the table. And it can go either way. Yeah, wait until we elect the rock. Yeah, I have no interest in reform. No, well, I mean, you can't reform this system. It's unreformable. It's like telling me you want to keep a burning building standing. Like, I'm like, but bro, like, workers are too co-opted by capitalism. I mean, like, I feel like the working class is just starting to. It's like when you're in a relationship with someone who is toxic and really bad, and everybody is telling you so, but you keep, like, saying, but he's so good, and I love him, and he's such, like, when we're alone, we have such great conversations. You know, that classic thing, we've all seen it. Like, we've all seen this happen. If not in our, like, if not directly in front of us in our lives, and we've seen it through our media, right? Like, this situation exists as common. And, like, I feel like we're in a moment right now where the partner is starting to realize, oh, maybe this person is, like, as bad as everybody is saying. Maybe everybody, well, and there is this kind of, like, light bulb that's starting to click on. I think that the younger generation, Gen Z, basically anybody under the age of 30 is already there. Every single time I talk to somebody who's like 25 and I start just saying, like, yeah, capitalism, eh? I get to, like, let's have a revolution like that with those kids. Like, if you're under the age of 25, like, you're like, yeah, fuck this place. I'm going to burn the whole thing fucking down. Like, fuck you, right? Perfect. Millennials get a little, like, yeah, but what are you going to do? Like, oh my God. And they're a little bit more suicidal about it. A lot of suicide envy going on in millennials. A lot of thinking about suicide. And it's sort of the upper age people. I think Gen X gets it, because I think Gen X always got it, but their position has always been that they've been trapped, and so they don't believe that you can find a way out. And then the boomers, I think, are demented. Like, for positive or negative, like even if they're, like, a happy demented, they're still demented. Like, they're not and let me be as fair as possible to the boomers. Like, even the ones that I think are, like, rah, rah, let's go, let's fight, you know, they're old. They're just fucking old. That's all. They're just old. You know, you can't expect much from them, right? That's fine. But millennials are weak as fuck on purpose. Millennials have only 4.5% of the total wealth. By this time, Gen X had 10%. The boomers had 25%. We're literally weak. We're literally weak. And when you actually do the math, Mark Zuckerberg has 2% of that wealth. So the millennials only have 4% of the wealth and Zuckerberg's got half of it. Yeah, we're weak. Fuck yeah, we're weak. Like, we don't have any tools. We don't have any resources. We don't have anything. That's why the only thing we have is our bodies. It's the only thing we have. And so we'll use our bodies to throw them into the machines of capital and grind them to a halt. It's the only thing we have left. Ugh. I envy you. You North Americans are very lucky. You're fighting the most important fight of all. You live in the belly of the beast. Yeah. Like, that's probably the most important thing that Guevara ever pointed out was, like, this is, like, we are in the heart of the empire. Like, we're not shooting the Death Star. We're not shooting against, like, we're not fighting against the peripheries of the empire. We are literally in the heart of the empire. We are in Darth Vader's kingdom. We are standing under the shadow of his throne, trying to organize a revolution. Like, that's our position. I think we've got a much more difficult position than people like Che Guevara had. Like, really. Like, I think that if we are honest about what we are facing up against is going to be far, far more aggressively brutal. Far more aggressively brutal than what the Cuban Revolution had to face. Far more aggressively brutal. One of the shitlibs I have listened to for years today said that nationalism is a dying political frame. Fuck off. Time to abandon that fucking shithead. Was that Destiny? Was that Destiny who said that shit? I bet. Fucking liberals, man. They're just like the stupidest batch of idiots. Are you kidding me? Capitalists will never give up nationalism. Nah. Well, and I gotta be straight. I think that nationalism supersedes politics. Like, nationalism is its own force. It lives. It's just like the monkeys. It's just the monkey thing. Like, these people are close to me and therefore are good. Like, that's it. Like, that's it. I don't think it's a fascist, socialist, communist, liberal, conservative, libertarian. I don't think it's any of that. I think it is its own thing. It's a very powerful force. And if somebody is genuinely going to say that, oh, we can do away with nationalism, or nationalism is a dying thing, that's a person you can safely go, okay, champy, whatever you have to say. Because reality itself will just show them how stupid they are, right? Nationalism will never die. It'll never go away. And to pretend like it will, I think you're just fucking fooling yourself. Like, we've dabbled in international politics now for like 150 years because we here in the West have had like the superiority to be able to do so, the militancy to be able to do so. But we're learning, and we're going to learn the hard way, that ignoring the nation in favor of this global economy, right, it's going to have dire consequences. Dire consequences. Gen Z is nuts. They're either tankies or naked fascists. Yeah, very well. But exactly, Compton. Like, what do I keep saying? There is no middle ground anymore, right? The only people who think that there's middle ground are the people who kind of lived in a place where there was, and they just don't want to admit that that's gone. Whereas Gen Z kids, all they've ever known is communism or fascism. That's it. Like, all they know is that the world that exists right now is unacceptable. Right? The world as it exists right now is unacceptable, and they pick one of two sides, which is fight against it, right? Communism, or embrace it and just grind set and join subjugation crews and blame the LGBTQ community, the woke crowd, right? Like, those are the two sides of the battle. And there is no middle ground. And if somebody tries to tell you they're a middle ground, they're on the side of the fascists. That's all it is, right? The people who are walking around being like, you'll alienate the centrists, are just fascists. Or at least clueless. Yeah, boomers were raised as fascists. Operation Paperclip 100%. I mean, how did they watch the Vietnam War happen? Like, how did they watch the Vietnam War happen? Like, really, guys, like, I think about that all the time. Like, imagine if the government right now said, we're doing it, we're evoking a draft, we're taking all of the young men out of the society, we're sending them overseas to essentially commit a genocide against unarmed groups of civilians. Like, and we just watch it? We just be like, God bless the troops! God bless the troops! Like, are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, we are so deeply propagandized. Yeah, people don't understand anything about economic systems. Yeah, we've been purposely forced into this individualism mindset. We are inside the Death Star. No, we're inside the factory that built the Death Star. Like, it's so much worse than that, dude. Like, we're not inside the Death Star. Like, we're inside the factory that constructed the Death Star. Like, like, we wish we were in the Death Star. I'm 60% done with starting a gourmet mushroom farm. Look at you. Self-employment is a wonderful escape from capitalist relationships. I hope that works, bud. A gourmet mushroom farm. Holy shit. You gotta tell me more about that, Grinning. That's a great idea. I think of this kind of shit. I think that kind of shit could mean a like, I want to do that kind of shit. I want to make like a little garden in here, you know? Like, I want to get some crops growing. Like, I want to do that. I'm just like a bit at a loss, which is stupid because I know people who could help me out with it. Anyway. Oh, Beau of the Fifth Column. Yeah, I think, look, I think it's just like, well, it's just like people are living in a dream world. They or they want to believe. That's all. They just want to believe, you know? Like, and I think that that's completely possible, right? That, like, they just want to believe it's true. They just want to believe it's true. But it's so tough. It's so tough to put aside your hopes and wishes. It's so tough to like, you want to believe that something good is going to happen. Like, you want to believe it. And it's just not going to go down that way. Beau had gone off the deep end. Blue no matter who. Yeah. Used to teach anarchism. Super disappointing. Yeah. Well, because if you refuse to accept what it means to do away with electoral politics, like, if you're caught in if you're caught in the game of electoral politics, especially in the United States, like, it's especially noticeable in the United States. If you get caught in that game, then yeah, like, all you can do is vote blue no matter who, right? That's all you can do. Like, the Republicans are obviously unacceptable. They're completely off the deep end, right? And if you want to continue believing in the idea of electoral politics and you refuse to acknowledge that there are other ways to go about this, right? There are other things to do. If you don't want to think about what that means, and if you don't want to think about how to engage in politics outside of electoralism, then you're basically just left with vote blue no matter who, right? Like, don't talk about surrounding the halls of power. Don't talk about organizing major protest movements. Don't talk about jamming up infrastructure. Don't talk about destroying infrastructure. God help you. God help you if you talk about destroying infrastructure. Holy shit, right? Like, so don't talk about any of that shit, right? It's all just like, we'll vote our way out of fascism. That's how we'll get rid of Hitler. We'll vote him out of office. Yeah, I guess all the YouTube quote-unquote radicals, yeah. I 100% refuse to listen to progressives and anti-authoritarians about the Donbass War. Oh, are there other people actually mentioning the Donbass War? Does that actually happen? Oh yeah, Ukraine brought the Nazi influences out of the woodwork, for sure. For sure that happened. There were some real lines drawn in the sand. There were some real lines drawn in the sand about the Ukraine war. Like, in many ways, I'm actually quite grateful. Like, I know that's a horrible thing to say. I understand. But at the same time, it's like, I would rather these people be operating nakedly in front of us than hiding in the shadows pretending to be our friends. You know? Like, I'd rather understand who my enemies are and where they stand than have people sort of pretending as though, yeah, we're all in this together, right? Like, here's one from the Jacobin. Here's one from the Jacobin. Yeah, you are right, Cotton. You are right, right? It's not the Ukraine war. It's the Donbass war. You're right. And to me, I think it's a very important shift in language. And we should all start calling it and correct one another. Politely, comradely, but we really should. We should correct one another and call it the Donbass war, because that's what it actually is. It's not the Ukraine war, it's the Donbass war. The CIA has been secretly training anti-Russian groups in Ukraine since 2015. Everything we know points to the likelihood that includes neo-Nazis inspiring far-right terrorists across the world. I had the pleasure of speaking to someone whose father actually was overseas training troops in Ukraine. So they're part of the military. And they said to me, yep, Dad came home and he said, I was training Nazis. Wah, 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 wah. The U.S. government has a well-documented history of backing extremist groups as part of a panoply of foreign policy misadventures, which inevitably end up blowing up in the American public's face. In the 1960s, the CIA worked with Cuban anti-Fidel Castro radicals, who turned Miami into a hub of terrorist violence. In the 1980s, the agency supported and encouraged Islamic radicals converging in Afghanistan, who would go on to orchestrate the September 11th attack. And in the 2010s, Washington backed Syria's not-so-moderate rebels, who ended up cutting a swath of atrocities through civilian and the Kurdish forces that were meant to be U.S. allies. Based on a new report, it looks like we may soon be able to add another to that list of fatally unlearned lessons: Ukrainian neo-Nazis. According to a recent Yahoo News report, since 2015, the CIA has been secretly training forces in Ukraine to serve as insurgent leaders, in the words of one former intelligence official, in case Russia ends up invading the country. Current officials are claiming the training is purely for intelligence collections, but the former officials Yahoo spoke to said the program involved training in firearms, cover and move, and camouflage, among other things. Given the facts, there's a good chance that the CIA is training actual, literal Nazis as part of this effort. The year the program started, 2015, also happened to be the same year that Congress passed a spending bill that featured hundreds of millions of dollars worth of economic and military support for Ukraine, one that was expressly modified to allow that support to flow to the country's resident neo-Nazi militia, the Azov Regiment. According to The Nation, at the time, the text of the bill passed in the middle of that year featured an amendment explicitly barring arms, training, and other assistance to Azov, but the House committee in charge of the bill was pressured by the Pentagon months later to remove the language, falsely telling them it was redundant. Despite sometimes open acknowledgement of its Nazism, its former commander once said the historic mission of Ukraine is to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade for their survival, in a crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. Azov was incorporated into the country's National Guard in 2014, owing to its effectiveness in fighting Russian separatists. U.S. arms have flowed to the militia, NATO and U.S. military officials have been pictured meeting with them, and members of the militia have talked about their work with the U.S. trainers and lack of background screening to weed out white supremacists. I'm just going to quickly bookmark this one. This is a good one. Given all this, it would be more of a surprise that the neo-Nazis of Azov haven't been trained in the CIA's clandestine Make an Insurgency program, and we're already seeing the early signs of blowback. A number of prominent individuals among far-right extremist groups in the United States and Europe have actively sought out relationships with representatives of the far right in Ukraine, specifically the National Corps and its associated militia, the Azov Regiment, states a 2020 report from the West Point U.S. Military Academy's Combating Terrorism Center. U.S.-based individuals have spoken or written about how the training available in Ukraine might assist them and others in their paramilitary-style activities at home. A 2018 FBI affidavit asserted that Azov is believed to have participated in training and radicalizing United States-based white supremacy organizations, including members of the white supremacist Rise Above movement, prosecuted for planned assaults on counter-protesters at far-right events, including the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally that Joe Biden later co-opted as a rationale for his presidential campaign. While it seems the perpetrator of the Christchurch Mosque massacre didn't travel to Ukraine as he claimed, he clearly took inspiration from the far-right movement there and wore a symbol used by Azov members while carrying out the attack. Since taking office, Biden has launched an incipient domestic war on terror on the basis of combating far-right extremism, even though the strategy is quietly aiming to target left-wing protesters and activists, something it has already done. Yet, at the same time, 3 separate administrations, Biden's included, have been providing training, weapons, and equipment to the very far-right movement that's inspiring and even training those same white supremacists. Destroying a village to save it. Adding to the absurdity here is that the reason Washington has been giving Ukrainian Nazis his assistance is so they can serve as a bulwark against Russia, which war hawks liken, as they always do, to Adolf Hitler's regime and its expansion through Europe in the 1930s. While Vladimir Putin's Russia may be a malevolent actor on a number of fronts, Putin's recent incursions into neighboring states like Ukraine are driven largely by the expansion of the NATO military alliance up to his borders, and the security implications that come with it. In other words, to stop what U.S. hawks classify as the next Hitler in Nazi Germany, Washington has been backing literal neo-Nazi militias in Ukraine, who are in turn communicating with and training homegrown white supremacists, which Washington in turn is ramping up a menacing repressive bureaucracy at home to counter. It's what some have called the self-licking ice cream cone. In action, the U.S. national security establishment creating the very threats that justify itself. Instead of diffusing the tensions by simply agreeing to long-standing Russian demands to set hard limits on NATO eastward expansion, Washington has apparently decided that unlimited planetary military dominion is so important that it would rather just get into bed with actual fascists. The U.S. alliance with Nazi-infected Ukraine has already proved awkward for a president who is both trying to strike a contrast with his far-right predecessor and establish the United States as the leader of a global effort to strengthen democracy. Late last year, in a vote that went completely unreported in the press, the United States was one of just 2 countries, the other being Ukraine, to vote against a UN draft resolution combating glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other practices that contribute to fueling contemporary forms of racism. Both countries have consistently voted against this resolution every single year since 2014. The Biden administration deployed a nearly identical boilerplate explanation for its no vote that Donald Trump had used, citing the constitutional right to free speech, even for those with repugnant views. But this concern is hard to square with the text, which simply expresses concern about public memorials, demonstrations, and rehabilitations of the Nazis, condemns Holocaust denial and hate violence, and calls on governments to eliminate racism through education and addressing far-right terrorist threats, all roughly the same as Biden's own rhetoric and policies. Washington's real concern here lies in its description of the resolution as thinly veiled attempts to legitimize Russian disinformation campaigns denigrating neighboring nations, meaning Ukraine. But Ukraine's connection to modern Nazism are far from Russian fake news and are in fact extensive and well documented. From Azov's official incorporation into the ranks of Ukraine law enforcement and government officials with far-right ties to state-sponsored tributes to Nazi collaborators and promotion of Holocaust denial. It's no small irony that the U.S. president, elected in large part to halt the perceived march of fascism at home, is continuing long-standing U.S. support for literal Nazis in what may well be the nexus of international fascism. And if these Ukrainian Nazis really are among the insurgents being trained by the CIA, it will be no small tragedy if they one day take the same career trajectory as Osama bin Laden. I mean, come on. We all know what's going to happen in Ukraine. What a great article this was, eh? So first of all, big hand to the Jacobin publishing something legitimate, something worth reading for once. This was by Branko Marketic. Well done. Well done. Very good article. Thank you, sir. We know that Zelensky has already banned left-wing parties, right? Left-wing, including the center-left party, which was his opposition party, right? So imagine if Justin Trudeau stood up and banned the Conservative Party right now. That's exactly what Zelensky did. So every party that's to the left of, like, literal, like, him and then Nazis has been banned. So what that means is that there's only Nazis left. Like, there's only conservatives left. There's only people who are at least like, the Nazis, I guess. Like, so what this means is that as the elections, quote unquote, go on in Ukraine, it's only a matter of time until these people elect a literal Nazi. A literal Nazi. Not just a cover. Not someone like Zelensky who's just doing what they're telling them. Doing what they say, right? Not some just patsy fucking stand-up comedian loser who just finds himself in this situation with the Nazis basically being like, no, fuck you, go die, right? That's not what's happening. Eventually the Nazis will just take power officially, right? Eventually the Nazis will literally, like, we are going to see full scale, like, Nazi salutes, Nazi parades. Like, it's going to be Nazism open in Ukraine. And it is our fault. It is our fault. Garv Taneja, don't know if I've ever seen you here, bud. Good to see you. Channel's growing, no one can stop it but me. Well, or a bullet, but that's fine. For 8 years, the Azov and Red Sector persecuted the eastern regions. Yeah, that's the Donbass War, baby. We don't ever talk about it. You all see that Al-Qaeda from Syria is showing up in hundreds to Ukraine? Oh shit, the CIA woke pivot was to get the local insurgencies primed to the U.S. enemies. The USA knows what Russia is conservative, so they're trying to make sure that there's local struggles to cause instability. That's right, it's the woke agenda, man. It might actually explain why the CPRF endorsed closing the gay bars. If your entry is through progressive hotspots, you get your recruits in places like gay bars. Now we're thinking. Yeah. Instant insurgency. Just add Nazis. What's funny is that people that concern troll that multipolarity will lead to war as their attempts to maintain unipolarity are creating war. Yeah, exactly. Like, exactly, right? Like, instead of, like, reasonably negotiating with one another and just coming to terms with one another, let's do war. Like, I was listening to a video today where you have people of Donbass showing what kind of books Ukraine's school library and kindergarten. They literally had books that called Russians orcs. Oh, brilliant. Just fucking brilliant, dude. Like, straight up. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Why can't we ever indoctrinate our kids into things that are nice? You know what was a really nice indoctrination? Sesame Street. Sesame Street was okay. It was always trying to teach us how to share. It was always trying to teach us that, like, people who are different are not so bad from one another, you know? I didn't mind some Sesame Street. It's a shame that the people that were running the place were also pedophiles. What can you do? You can't win every fight. Praising Stefan Bandera, promote nationalism in Ukraine, demonize Russia at every turn. Yeah. The Stefan Bandera connection is less like, I love it when liberals are just like, whatever, Stefan Bandera, and you're like, he was like literally a Nazi, like he collaborated with Nazis, helped them erect a literal concentration camp, and the deputy prime minister of Canada is like walking around with a flag of him. What are you fucking talking about? Yeah, the Ukrainian hatred of Russian speakers is breathtaking. Nobody will talk about it ever. Yeah. Just imagine having those books and replaced with Jews, black, or LGBTQ, and the outrage we'll hear. But Russian, yeah, that's totally fine, yeah. Ukrainians suffer from internalized racism and hate the idea that they have Asian ancestry, same as the Russians. Oh, yes. Oh, great to be here. I like your format of sharing info. Kudos. Thank you, Garv. I appreciate that. I truly do. Tell your friends, tell your wives, tell the world. Tell the world that I exist and that socialism must win the day. Yeah, that's why they try so hard to quote-unquote be white. Yeah. And the things in Ukraine, they already have open Nazi rallies, but the West don't cover it. Yeah, I can easily post a video in the Discord that shows a rally even having a Nazi symbol on a kindergarten. Dude, do that. Do that. Put that in the resources section, dude. No, we need all of the evidence we possibly can for these fucking brain-dead liberals. For these literal, like, brain-dead, simping, bootlicking liberals. So that when they turn around finally, like when the Nazism becomes too unavoidable for them, right? And they start going like, oh, well, we always do, right? Because that's what they'll do, right? That's what liberals do. Like, liberals are like, I always say on this channel, I actually like conservatives better than liberals. I think that liberals are worse than conservatives. Because at least conservatives stand for something and you know what they stand for. And they're not lying about it. Right? At least they're looking you in the eye and they're telling you what they think. And they're not bullshitting it. It's reprehensible. It's despicable. And they're despicable people. But it's still what they they believe what they say. Whereas the I'm sorry, Georgiana just like totally derailed me with that question. That's amazing. Georgiana, I hope that you are asking that sarcastically. I hope that was a sarcastic comment right there. Oh, sweet summer child. Sweet summer child. Liberals will look you in the eye and say, oh yeah, we're in this together, we're going to do everything, and then just completely stab you in the back. They're sniveling, bootlicking cowards. Like, and they can't help themselves. They just can't help themselves. They literally, and so as soon as the wind blows in the next direction, right, as soon as it becomes obvious that, yeah, Ukraine is a Nazi state, like it's obvious now, like as soon as that happens, liberals will just be like, well, we always knew, and I was always against the war. Why? Compton. That's fine, dude. There's nothing wrong with that. If you can live in that environment, and if you can make that happen for yourself, off to the races. Oh, yeah, you got to immediately start asking questions. Like, we're getting a huge influx of refugees. Like, we're getting a lot of Ukrainian refugees in Canada right now. It's the same thing that happened after World War II. We got this huge influx of Ukrainian refugees, and a lot of them were literal neo-Nazis. Or, sorry, not neo-Nazis, literal Nazis, right? They were just fascists. And they were running to Canada and the United States because they couldn't go anywhere else. Because if they went, they couldn't go to Russia because they would just literally get killed. They couldn't really go anywhere across Europe because the anti-fascist sentiment was so thick. And so they fled to Canada and the United States, right? And now we've got weird little fascist groups that have glommed on to like the Liberal Party, which is like the Deputy Prime Minister, literally her grandfather ran a Nazi newspaper. Like, like what do you? And so we've got all these refugees coming in from Ukraine, and I'm like, yeah, I bet you more than one of those guys is a Nazi. I bet we got a lot of Nazis. So suddenly we're having a big insurgency of Nazism. I can't imagine where that's coming from, right? I don't know where that's coming from. Yeah, please do, Eric. Thank you. Why does the CBC not report this? Georgiana, I'm going to answer that question as if it was serious. Just because I can't tell. And I want to honor you. Especially as a newcomer. Glad to have you. Glad to see you. I hope you're doing well in the world. The CBC will not report this because what we are looking at in Ukraine is an imperialist war. That the war in Ukraine, which is called the Donbass War, starts well before Putin's invasion. That the Americans fomented a Nazi-fueled coup, overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014 during what's called the Euromaidan crisis. They overthrew the Ukrainian government, and then using the Nazis, the Azov battalion, went to the Donbass region and began shelling it. They banned speaking in Russian. They did massacres in places like Mariupol. 14,000 people died in 8 years through the indiscriminate shelling. None of this reported. None of this reported because it's an imperialist war with an imperialist agenda. And the CBC is state-run propaganda, right? The CBC is a state-run institution that operates on behalf of the Liberal Party. Right now, the Liberal Party. It shifts by whichever party gets in. But it's essentially run by the oligarchy. And the oligarchy doesn't want the public to know about its war that it started in the Donbass region. It wants everybody to believe that the Donbass War, the quote-unquote Ukraine war, began when the evil dictator Putin, in a crazed night vision, just decided to seize territory in Ukraine for resources, for his own mad agenda, that he's the next Hitler. That's what they want you to think. And so they're absolutely never going to report the neo-Nazis they are creating in Ukraine, because then the people of the country might actually go, maybe the oligarchy is illegitimate, we should overthrow it. They're never going to do that. They're never going to do that. That's why people come to me. That's why I have legitimacy. That's why my channel is growing. That's why more people are showing up. And that's why more people will continue to show up. Because the CBC, the National Post, the Globe and Mail, all of the newspapers, all of the media has been purchased by the oligarchy. That they are owned by literal psychopaths who are attempting to destroy the society. They're never going to tell you about this shit. Because then you might actually realize that they're psychopaths and then try to do something about it. Stick around. You'll learn more. They were hella concerned about Syrian refugees bringing in terrorists, but not so worried about the relatively civilized Ukrainians bringing in Nazis. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Like, Syrian refugees, we've got to vet them, we've got to make sure. Now, I'm not saying that every Syrian is a mudblood. I'm not saying that every Syrian is a dirty person. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that it would be crazy for any country to just let thousands of people come into their borders and just mingle among them. What, a bunch of white people? Come on in, whites! Those poor Ukrainians, don't you know they've been under attack by the evil villain Hitler Putin? Come on in! But border checks? No, don't even worry about it. You're white! And my partner keeps saying that they see a couple red flags and has yet to say what those are. And they're a passionate liberal. A passionate liberal, eh? Like, dude, I gotta tell you right now, full stop. I don't care, like the Ukrainian thing, okay, like the Russian thing, okay, all that kind of stuff. Passionate liberal, yeah, that's a no from me, dog. That's a hard no. Just gonna. That's not a red flag. That's a cross that I am erecting on the grave. That is the idea of us getting together. I really love Justin. I'm really passionate about Justin Trudeau. Like, that's what that is for me. Like, I don't care if she's like a fucking supermodel. I don't care if she was like the hottest woman that ever lived. I would put my shirt back on and pull my pants up and be like, baby, it was fun, and walk out the door. Yeah, the Donbass War was nightly news in Russia for 8 years. How could it not be? Like, for real, how could it not be? There was shelling going on the Russian border for 8 fucking years. Like, fuck yeah. If there was like a group of fucking white supremacists that were dropping bombs just on the other side of the border of Ontario, I'd be like, can we report on that every single night? I would like to know what the developments of the Nazis that are bombing people on the other side of the Ontarian border, please. Like, of course they were talking about it. Like, this I talk about this all the time when it comes to the major difference between, like, the reason why the Russians are going to win is because for us, this is all just like changing the flag on Facebook and eating our cheeseburger and just being like, I can't believe what Putin's doing. Oh my God. Go to war? No, thank you. Hashtag no, thank you. I'm got. That's us. The Russians are like sitting there watching a horror show on their fucking border. They're watching people like bleed to death and just like an absolute nightmare show right over there. Like looking out their window and there's just someone being stabbed to death. Like that's their experience. So we're little babies with tiny little baby brains, right? Looking at this situation, being like, yeah, we're never going to interact with that in a legitimate way. It's across an ocean in a place that we couldn't find on a map. Like, Americans are not finding you. They don't know where Ukraine is. You'd show them the map and they'd be like, well, I know it's beside Russia. That's Americans. Like, so the Russians are going to fight tooth and nail. They're going to fight tooth and nail because for them it's an existential threat. It's real. It's in front of them. It is a bloodbath, and they know it. Whereas for America, it's just like, did you hear that Will Smith slapped Chris Rock? And it's over. For the vast majority of America, the Ukraine war mattered this much. That's it. That's all it took. My spouse is a hardcore lefty, and they were virulent reactionary when we first met. You know, Compton, I'm going to pass the ball back over to you, bud, and just be like, Godspeed, okay? You keep me up to date on this, though. You keep me up to date on this. Oh, Garv, coming in. I agree that NATO is a fascistic war machine. Good. Puts you ahead of the game. But Putin is also just another warmonger, no? A lot of civilians are still dying in Ukraine, and innocent Russian people are being used as cannon fodder. So, my position on Putin is as simple as this. I think that if Putin had his way, like if it was all up to Putin, right? Congratulations, Vladimir Putin. You are the leader of Russia. Putin's vision for Russia was to join NATO. Was literally to just integrate himself into the Western system of international politics. And how do I know that? Because it's all he ever tried to do. Like literally since the beginning of his term until his rejection from NATO, all he was trying to do is integrate himself in. He was part of the remember the G7, you know, the G7 summits Well, they used to be the G8 summits, right? Because Putin was part of that, right? And I think that Putin really turned a corner and really started to realize that he needed to go take the country another direction when he applied to be a NATO member, which was always kind of the trajectory for the post-communist years, for the post-Soviet years, right? Khrushchev and Gorbachev and Yeltsin and all these guys, their whole idea was like, well, let's just get in bed with these guys. Let's merge up. Forget about this communist idea. Let's do this neoliberal agenda. Let's connect to the international system of trade. Let's get into this game of oligarchy, right? Let's do that. And Putin was just another one of these guys, former KGB, right? His objective was to continue that trajectory and get connected into NATO. And in 2010, they rejected him, right? In 2010, NATO said no thank you. And Putin was very open and was just like, the reason why NATO exists was to dismantle and destroy the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union no longer exists, and you are rejecting us from it. It is very difficult for me to interpret this any other way than to say that NATO exists to destroy Russia. He's very open about it. When the Americans destroyed Libya, Putin was extremely expressive about how terrifying that was and how unreasonable and psychotic that was, right? The destruction of Libya is we talk about the Iraq War a lot because I think people are really conscious and aware of the Iraq War, but people don't understand the Libyan War at all. People don't understand what happened in Libya. It was vicious, cruel, and brutal. And Putin had a lot to say about it. And since 2010, I think Putin has basically been just realigning his vision for his country and pivoting it in a way to try to continue moving it forward so that it succeeds as an existential nation. That it isn't destroyed like Libya was destroyed, right? Because that's their goal. And Putin, I think, is aware of this. That he looked at Libya and went, oh, that's what they want to do. Oh, okay. And he starts pivoting towards China. He gets connected to the Belt and Road Initiative. He gets connected to BRICS. He gets connected to China with a currency type. And all of this kind of stuff, right? Let me get to the final point, Garv, okay? Which is to say that I don't think Putin had a choice. Okay? I don't valorize Putin because Putin is just a man. Right? He's just a person. He's just a human fucking being. So he's not worthy of our valorization as just another person. But I don't think he had an alternative. The Americans fomented a coup in Ukraine. They started shelling Ukrainians, funding neo-Nazis, which they're still doing. What was Putin supposed to have done? This is the question that I keep asking people. And I've had no one give me a serious response. All of the responses I've heard and been like, yeah, that's not going to happen. People will say, Putin should be fomenting a workers' revolution. I'm like, yeah, he's not going to do that. That's not where Putin is. That's not, maybe in an alternative timeline, sure. But what, for real, you answer me this question. What was Putin supposed to have done? Because to me, it looks like the answer to that question is exactly what he's currently doing, or allowing America to build a Nazi state on his border, unopposed. America's going to go to war with Russia no matter what. At least this way it's happening to a degree on Putin's terms. At least this way Russia is engaging in the war with its own moves and its own dance steps. Like, it's not going to sit back and watch America build a powerful NATO-backed Nazi state to then invade Russia. Russia has a history with Nazis. Russia has a strong and powerful history with Nazis. And I really want to put as strong a pin in this as I can. It wasn't the right move or the wrong move. It was the only move. He couldn't have done anything else. That the wrong move would have been to do nothing at all. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that, bud. Like, the villains of the piece have always been the Americans. And the reason why the Americans are the villains of the piece is because they could have stopped all of this at any moment. Literally, they still could. And they still could. That it's the Americans that are the aggressors. It's the Americans that are pushing forward with the war. It's the Americans that are continuing the war effort. It's the Americans that could at any moment end it. And they could end it as simply as just saying, we are going to abide by the Minsk Accords. That's it. The entire time, since 2014 forward, Putin has been in negotiations. He has been trying to negotiate some kind of peace with the Ukrainians, with NATO, with the Americans, every single step of the way. He has been negotiating with these guys. And it was only until very recently that I think Putin finally truly accepted, that diplomacy is not an option. That even as he was invading Ukraine, I think he was like, the way he invaded Ukraine was very... I think he hoped that the invasion itself would lead to a secession. That he would invade and everybody would throw up their arms and go, whoa, 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 okay, you're being serious. Okay, whoa, 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 whoa. Time out. Right? Because of the method of his invasion and the way that he did it. And the fact that he was keeping diplomacy going and they were still talking. Right? But then it became obvious that there wasn't going to be a quick solution. And so they redeployed to the Donbass region. Right? Remember, when they initially came in like in a kind of surround, like a all borders sort of thing. And I think he was hoping that was going to be it. That it was going to be like a collapsing in and the white flag would go up and they would sign a paper and that would be the end of it. But then that wasn't the case. And so they went to the Donbass, right? And they've started to work out entrenched positions and all of this. And I think it's within the last few months that Putin has finally recognized that, I'm gonna have to shell Kiev. I really think that he's just now accepting that the Americans are not going to stop, the Ukrainian Nazis are not going to stop. There isn't going to be a big sweeping through and a big surrender. And I just see a guy who is just like, man, I do not want to go down in history for having done this. I do not want to be thought of as the man who shelled Kiev. And he's going to have to. He will. By the end of it, he's going to have to shell Kiev and he's going to have to go into the parliament. He's going to have to. Because you can't negotiate with Nazis. And America has no skin in the game. So as long as the Americans are willing to funnel weapons and arms into the neo-Nazis will fight to the death because they're Nazis and you can't negotiate with them. U.S. may actually end up causing a nuclear holocaust because of their callousness. I mean, we'll see about that. I don't generally... Hey, Anemone, how you doing? Oh yeah, we've already talked about what Dofo is doing, dude. We know all about it. Yeah. You are no longer allowed to strike in Ontario if you're an education worker. Yeah, and I mean, my point is, if the nurses, doctors, firemen, like all the unions, except the police's union, obviously, because we know which side they're on, if they don't all strike now, and they just watch the CUPE get crushed, it's over. Now's the time. If the strike doesn't happen now, then we are a fascist country. Like, at least a fascist province. Like, it's got to happen now. And hopefully the nurses and the doctors and all the rest are taking what's happening very seriously and understand the stakes. Because if they all just stand by and watch the CUPE get crushed, then Doug Ford will just say no to them forever. And any future leader of Ontario will simply say no. Because if they strike, they'll crush them. And they know they can, and they know it'll work. And they also know that they won't protect one another. Right? Like, if the nurses and the doctors and the teachers and the firefighters and all these guys, if they don't stand up and protect one another when threatened this way, then what's the point of the union system? Like, for real, what's the point of it? And if they just watch a union get crushed, then Doug Ford is just going to be like, oh, I could just say no to you. Okay, no. Oh, new contract up? No. Accept it. Get out of my office. And that's the relationship that's coming if they don't do it now. I mean, Anemone, let's be specific about what I mean. Like, you and I know that this is a fascist state. Like, we know, right? But it's not yet nakedly so, right? This is a moment where it could become naked, right? Well, this is a moment where it's become naked, right? Like, this is fascism. This is Doug Ford being a fascist. Like, it's open, it's naked. He's not pretending to be anything else, right? But it's not naked. It's not like Nazi salutes, big Nazi parades, that kind of thing, right? And I don't want to just glaze by this because I'm sure that there are people in the chat, like, a push for nuclear war in the media is a horror show. So I want to try to soothe people's consciousnesses and soothe your burden on this point of nuclear war, because this is an electric bolt across the brain. I love it, Anemone. Anyway, carry on. Thank you, Anemone. A blessing as always. Like, the threat of nuclear war is like an electric bolt that goes across your consciousness and across your brain, right? Like, it's a bigger idea than you as an individual can withstand. That it's so full of horror, and it's so full, and it's so the instantaneous nature and how quickly it can just like shift and change really creates inside of one's consciousness a looming darkness that we have to acknowledge, and I hope that you understand we all share. You're not alone. You're not in the corner of your bedroom shaking in fear by yourself. We're all right there. We're all right there with it. And there's a lot of saber rattling going on. But one of the things, yeah, bottle caps and stim packs, that's what it's going to come down to. You got it, Chris. One of the things that I think is important to remember during this moment is that it is to all parties' benefit. That's the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Americans, the Europeans. It's to everyone's benefit to saber rattle about nuclear bombs. That should it come to nuclear war, then that's it. Like, we don't need to worry about it. Like, if it happens, it happens, and you're not going to be aware of it anyway. And if you are aware of it, it won't be for too much longer. Like, nuclear, if even a single, and I will say this, if even a single nuke drops, That's the end of Western civilization. Like, there's no laws. You don't need to pay attention to the laws of the civilization. If they're failing to protect us from nuclear bombs, like, we don't need to abide by any of this. I mean, we need to acknowledge their laws, but they're no longer laws, they're just threats. Like, that's the truth. Right? That's the truth. And but I tend to think of it like this, which is that it's to everyone's benefit. It's to all the leaders' benefit, specifically. Not everyone, obviously. But it's to the benefit of all the leaders of all the countries to saber-rattle about nuclear war. Because it keeps all countries invested in the war. That saber-rattling about nuclear bombs, being like, Putin could drop the bomb, keeps people invested in the idea that the Ukrainian war needs to continue. So for the Americans, it keeps attention, and it allows people to accept another $1 billion to get sent to Ukraine instead of fixing bridges or doing anything important, right? It allows people to sort of accept that. They're like, well, like, Putin could drop the nuke, right? Oh, the nuclear bomb is in place, so we got to fight back against that Putin. Keeps the Ukrainians in position as well. Keeps them being under the looming threat of a nuclear bomb, right? Like, so it keeps them invested in the idea that we need to maintain this war effort and we need to push forward. And even more, most importantly of all, it keeps the Russians engaged. It keeps the Russians on side, and it keeps the Russians on board. So the nuclear devastation narrative as a propaganda piece is actually one of these rare moments where all parties find it useful. And it is useful. It's useful for Putin. It's useful for Biden. It's useful for Zelensky. It's useful for all the fucking Germany and France and Spain and all these guys. It's useful for all of them because it keeps everybody on side and everybody in position and everybody at odds with one another. That's what it does. And it ensures that everyone accepts more readily the idea that the war must continue because these are the stakes, right? And so once you kind of understand it more from a propaganda perspective, that they are terrorizing you with this propaganda. That this propaganda is not, it goes beyond your typical propaganda. That what we are experiencing is terrorism. We are being terrorized by our own countries and by our own propaganda systems to keep us in line. Is the threat of nuclear war genuine? I think it's more likely that should a nuclear bomb go off, that it would be accidental. That actually the idea that these groups of people are actually going to go through the process of launching a nuclear arsenal, I really, really, really don't see it. Just from a basic human kind of a level. Like, I think about what it would take for a group of human beings to actually be in the control room and actually go through the process of launching the nuclear arsenal. And like, we're talking about like an open occultish death cult. Like literally like slaughtering goats, wearing the cloaks, doing the chants. Like the room would be covered in blood and human sacrifice. Like that's the type of people who would get to that point. And I don't think we're there. Like, not yet. Not yet. Right? And there's just enough steps. Like, it really isn't as simple as the President of the United States with his finger on the button going, I could do it at any moment. It's not how it is. Right? There are steps. There are things that... And the idea that everybody would just go along with it 100% and that there would be nobody I just have a hard time swallowing that pill. I have a hard time swallowing that. And so for me, I take a look at the nuclear bomb narrative and I go, yeah, they're just terrorizing us with propaganda to keep us invested in the war. But, and Anemone, your point is well taken. It wouldn't be the first time they've dropped a nuke, but it pays to remember that at that time we didn't have this situation, right? Like, it wasn't that everybody had nukes. It wasn't mutually assured destruction. And the nuclear bomb was a new technology. It was a new thing. That's not to excuse how insane it is, what they did, right? Well, and World War II itself was just fucking insane, right? And in my view, the dropping of the nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was just the Americans leaving a little PS at the end of World War II saying, oh, by the way, we're fascists too, right? That's what the nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki ends up being for me. That just to make sure everybody understands that the Italians and the Japanese and the Germans were fascists, but the Americans were too, and still are. Just because not everyone in America would be okay with it doesn't mean it won't happen. It's the mutually assured destruction aspect of it. That's where it comes down. Yeah, the nukes on Japan were a message to the USSR, yeah, and ostensibly the rest of the world. Right, this is what we're willing to do. Which, I mean, of course, drives the rest of the world. Like, you need to have a nuke. Like, you need to have a nuke. Like, you need to have some kind of protection. Like, and the only protection that exists in a post-World War II world is just have a nuke. Right? And it's a crazy position to be in as a species. Like, it's a crazy position. Like, why do we even have these? We shouldn't even have these. Like, they just shouldn't exist. They shouldn't be at play. And especially today, actually. Like, here's what's so funny to me. Like, I am trying to make it less terrifying for everybody. But the truth is that the non-nuclear ordinance we have now is just as bad. Like, it's just as devastating. Have a good one, Radio Halifax, bud. Good to see you. Like we don't need nukes. Like, in my view, nuclear bombs are an ecological disaster more than anything. That the devastation that they can bring in terms of their destruction, we can equal that. We can equal that with non-nuclear ordnance. We've got that capacity. Nukes are not the top of the chain in terms of just rampant destruction. They're not. Some of the missiles they have now are just as bad. But nuclear bombs have this kind of like holy homage, right? There's just this understanding. You think of a nuclear bomb, you see the mushroom cloud, you see that scene from Terminator 2, right? Like it just has this perfect form of kind of crystallization in your mind of just like wholesale destruction. But we could do that without nukes. We're perfectly capable of it. Some of the ordnance that Russia has already used are just as bad in terms of their destruction. But because of the type of resources that are used in nuclear bombardment, nuclear material, the damage to the environment is unholy. Just absolutely unholy. Like, that to me is why the usage of nuclear bombs should be completely banned and we should simply dismantle them. Is because at least when we drop normal ordnance on each other, we're just killing humans and destroying infrastructure. But when you drop nuclear bombs, you're affronting nature itself. You're challenging the supremacy of the earth itself. You are awakening the old gods. And we simply shouldn't do it. We simply shouldn't do it. Oh, thank you, JJ. I appreciate it. Yeah, I do this Monday. I try to do it Monday. I've been really bad on Monday recently because life is insane. But I definitely do it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So please keep popping in. Tell people I exist. Let the world know. Like, share, subscribe. Hit all the bells. Hit all the whistles. We gotta keep pushing back. We gotta keep pushing back. If only to say to our children that we didn't do nothing. The West has nukes for threatening violence. The Global South has nukes to deter that violence. Yeah, seems like that is the case. That is the case. This is a real good article, dude. I'm really happy with this article. Yeah, bookmarked. Yeah, I'm going to talk about this article tomorrow. What a great article. So, the West is actually scared. The West is very scared of what is happening. The rising sense of communism actually does scare the shit out of the oligarchy. Because the oligarchy knows that it has no credibility. It understands that. Like, it understands that its ideas are dead, that what it's doing is essentially trying to bring feudalism back into the society. It understands that it's not going to happen peacefully. And I'm seeing more and more, like, this is the New York Times saying why the Communist Manifesto still matters. This is in a specter haunting the British fantasy writer and political activist China Mayville makes the case for why Marx and Engels' famous pamphlet remains vital today. Good to see you, Grinning. Thanks for popping in. I'm not going to read the whole thing, although it's quite short. Yeah, I'm going to read it. It's quite short. The way to tell if a fantasy novel was written by a Marxist, an observant person once said, is that it gets the ratio of peasants to lords right, while the bourgeoisie variety is off by orders of magnitude. China Mayville is a fantasy writer and a Marxist. On both scores, his bona fides are beyond reproach. Since 1998, he's published a string of best-selling, prize-winning, critically acclaimed fantasy novels of the so-called New Weird tendency, including the Perdido Street Station trilogy and his breakout novel, The City and the City, which was adapted for British television. As for Marxism, Mayville's dissertation in international relations between equal rights, a Marxist theory of international law, was published by Haymarket in 2006, and he was the Socialist Alliance candidate for British Parliament for a district in central London in the 2001 election. He lost to the Labour candidate. It is technically possible to be familiar with one of these aspects of Mayville's career, but it would require an act of will. His fantasy novels are shot through with class struggle, and in ways that are integral to the narratives. Novels like King Rat aren't gripping phantasmeric thrill rides despite their politics. Rather, it's the politics that imbues them with so much excitement and conflict. It turns out that class war is a hell of a plot device. Full disclosure, I've been a speaker at several literary conventions at which Mayville also spoke and once appeared with him on a panel. I have also had dinner with him. But for all that Mayville's literary and political vocations can't be easily separated, it's still rare for him to explicitly merge them. That changed in 2017, when he published October, The Story of the Russian Revolution, an account of the revolutionary ferment in the year-long run-up to the 1917 revolution. If the incidents October described were fictional, it would be a superb novel on par with any of Mayville's others. That is a work of history, one that is rigorous and faithful to the events of that time, makes it all the more remarkable. Mayville's latest book, A Spectre Haunting on the Communist Manifesto, is also a work of nonfiction, but it is not novelistic. Billed as an introduction to the manifesto, though it is substantially longer than the work itself, it is brilliant, even dazzling, if also esoteric, closer in style to Mayville's academic writing than to his published fiction and nonfiction. It's been 174 years since Marx and Engels first published the manifesto, and during the intervening decades it has accumulated a vast corpus of commentary, while continuing to win converts thanks to its moral clarity, thundering language, and incisive analysis. This despite its most glaring defect, because, of course, the manifesto's chief prediction, the imminent downfall of capitalism, was dead wrong. It has also won accolades from some of capitalism's most ardent defenders, including the economist Joseph Schumpeter, whose theory of creative destruction is integral to the ethos of Silicon Valley startups. Mayville sets to prove that the work is no historical curiosity, that it remains relevant today, not merely as a foil for arguments about Marxism's role in previous struggle, but as a vital guide to present-day ones. Over the course of 6 densely argued chapters, he grapples with both criticisms of the manifesto and the revolutions it has inspired. He is scrupulous in setting out the arguments against the work, making each case as forcefully as he can. Then, having done the critics justice, he counters each one with a mix of historical context, pointing out, for example, where Marx later added nuance to his position, historical precedent, indicating where radical movements have successfully deployed the reasoning and tactics the manifesto proposes, and where warranted, frank admissions of weakness that time has rendered inarguable, including, for example, the failure of the manifesto's predicted world literature to emerge. He untangles the seemingly contradictory accusations from leftist commentators that Marx and Engels underestimated the power of capitalism to adapt to changing circumstances, or, alternatively, lavished undue praise on capitalism's inventiveness. Mayville reconciles these conflicting claims. On the one hand, he argues, Marx and Engels didn't believe that capitalism's imminent collapse was inevitable. They thought that promising such a collapse could trigger a mass movement that would precipitate it. Mayville asks us to understand that the manifesto's various assertions as claim, prediction, or exhortation. On the other hand, he says, Marx and Engels' paeans to the capitalism's ingenuity reflected a string of stunning capitalist victories over feudalism, and both writers later added caveats reflecting their changing views on that subject. Other topics Mayville addresses included how to view the manifesto within the context of the global South. Marx deplored the slave trade, Mayville points out, and in later writings called for solidarity between European workers and colonized people the world over. Within movements for gender and racial equality, Marx failed to grapple with the women's rights struggle of his day, Mayville concedes, arguing that gender must be added to class to better understand class, gender, and capitalism together. And in the midst of the climate emergency, Marx's analysis shows capitalism's inability to address the problem, suggesting that a capitalist regime would first deny it, and then seek to remediate it with an ineffective market-based measures. And in light of authoritarian states from the USSR, authoritarian always with this, the USSR to China, that have waved the manifesto as their banners, demonstrating, Mayville contends, that authoritarian socialism from above has no basis in the work. Oh, I see how he's made it into the New York Times. I get it now. Clearly, Mayville's goal isn't merely to provide an introduction to Marx and Engels' remarkable little pamphlet. Rather, he seeks to unify a demoralized, disarrayed left that wants badly to stand athwart the looming crises of environmental collapse, rampant inequality, rising authoritarianism, and now nuclear Armageddon. Ultimately, a specter haunting is Mayville's case against leftist factionalism. He wants to show how differences might be synthesized into a powerful movement without its various members having to compromise on their priorities. His final chapter, on revolutionary hatred and revolutionary love, urges readers to cultivate comfort with contradiction, to abandon ideological certainty in favor of a band or zone of reasonable understandings and approaches, and finally, to hate harder than did the manifesto for the sake of humanity. As he explains, who would we be to hate this system and its partisans? If we don't, the hate of those who hate us on its behalf will not ebb. As a call to arms, though, a specter haunting is drier and more cerebral than the manifesto itself. In form, it belongs to the long leftist debate over revolutionary action, a debate that has become all the more urgent as capitalism threatens to roast and flood our world. if it doesn't incinerate it in radioactive clouds first. For readers who have followed this debate, a spectre haunting will be revelatory and dazzling. As Mayville finds commonalities among the ostensibly incomparable positions and solidarity amid divisions. His Communist Manifesto is the inspiration for a very big tent, one where class and race, gender, ability, sexuality, and origins are all part of a single revolutionary movement, not ceding priority to one another, but insisting that no liberation worth its name would exclude any of these elements. It's an appealing, if challenging, vision, and my copy of A Spectre Haunting is already dog-eared and underlined, the hallmarks of a book that demands revisiting. So that just happened in the New York Times. Like the dark heart of the propaganda empire. Why the Communist Manifesto still matters. And it wasn't a smear piece. It wasn't a way to reject anybody or dispel anything. It wasn't a way to dismiss communism. Quite the opposite, in fact. That the author of the piece seems very anti-capitalist in the way that they write. It's kind of a shocking piece that even 10 years ago, they would have never published this. That the best way to combat communism in my lifetime would be to just not talk about it. Right? Just don't talk about it. Just wave your hand at it, be like, oh, that's the great evil. Communism fails wherever it's tried. There's been no successful communist country. Right? All the just like narrow-minded, simple-minded propaganda that, like the propaganda responses you hear. And yet here we are, with the New York Times making a case for communism and the communist movement within its pages. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to make of it. This is what's so weird about Western leftists. If they overthrew their own capitalism, do they? Well, and one thing I get to thinking about an awful lot is one of the very successful capitalist strategies is to co-opt social movements aesthetically, but keep the systems of power in place. So a very easy one to point at is the Green Movement that happened throughout like the late 90s and into the early 2000s. That there was an upswell of environmental concern, and everybody was very much getting into this like climate change matters mode, and we've got to worry about the environment. And so what did all the corporations do? What did corporate power do? It made everything green, slapped a good for the environment thing on it. All of its advertising was like, yeah, we care about the environment too. But it didn't change a goddamn thing. Emissions went up. Right? Emissions went up. It's what the liberals have done. Right? Like, oh yeah, the carbon tax, and we really care about the environment, and then they buy a pipeline, and emissions have gone up, and they've subsidized the fossil fuel industry more than the conservatives did. So and you could make a pretty strong argument that they've done the same thing with LGBTQ, right? And even the civil rights movement, they've done it, where they've co-opted a lot of the aesthetic language and a lot of the aesthetics of it, but the behind-the-scenes abuse and the gaslighting and the exploitation is all in place. It's all the same. It's just fascism with a smiley little face on it. And so I think that the system of capital will try to co-opt the language and aesthetic of communism and socialism. It will attempt to, and it will change the language that it uses. Like, and changing language is very important for fascists, right? That you're not an employee. Like, when I worked for Starbucks, I was confronted with this right away. I wasn't an employee. I was a partner. And I was told that this somehow changed the relationship. That, oh, well, we give you this benefit, and so that makes you a partner. You're not an employee, you're a partner. And I never bought into that, but I watched people get bought into that and get suckered into that idea that, oh, I'm a partner, I'm better than an employee. And they'll call you comrade. They'll call you whatever you need to be called. They'll give you whatever little package they need to give you. They'll give you whatever concession that you need to get, as long as you show up and do the work on time. That's all that matters to them. As long as you show up and do the work on time. If they need to put a hammer and sickle everywhere, if they need to make sure that all of the books are about class struggle, if they need to make sure that you feel like you're the owner of the establishment, right? Even if they got to call you the owner, right? They'll do it. They'll do it. As long as you do the work and they do nothing at all. That's what matters. That's the only thing that matters. And if they can trick you into believing that you live in a communist society, when the structure of it is explicitly capitalist, they'll do it. They'll do it. And I think that we are seeing that happen. I think that is starting to happen. That capitalism will attempt to co-opt communism aesthetically before this is all said and done. Don't they think they'll be able to just be a problem against authoritarianism of China or anyone else? Yeah, just like, well, this is just it. Like, sounds to me like this guy, China Mayville, even though it sounds like his work is interesting and I think I would enjoy it, sounds to me like he's perfectly happy with the Western narratives against the Western imperial narratives against China and Russia, right? Sounds to me like he's perfectly happy with maintaining the system of imperialism, which, again, sounds to me like, yeah, great. You guys can be communists and yeah, sure, like, own the means of production and all that kind of stuff. We're just going to be over here doing war on the peripheries of an empire that you still fund. Right? That's what that sounds like to me. Yeah, it ain't shocking. They're trying to get people to understand communism from the ultra-left position. Anything that resembles the USSR or China is off the table. We are only allowed to do the things that won't win. Yeah, fuck that. Point the tanks at the Western left. Yeah, isn't that funny? That's a Michael Parenti point, right? That Western socialists only support the revolutions that fail. Right? Only support the revolutions that fail, only support the policies that don't work. And I think that there's like a kind of a madness to that. I think there's some kind of like deep madness looking at the USSR and looking at China and saying, yes, but it isn't real communism, it isn't real socialism, as if we, who have yet to actually foment a successful revolution, have anything to say, as if our opinion matters. That's where it gets really comical. Like, the proper position for communists to be at is to look at the USSR and to look at China, amongst the smattering of others, and learn from them. Like, is China the master? Are they the grand master? Maybe, maybe not. But they're definitely ahead of us. They're definitely ahead of us. And so the analogy that I've come to think of is it's like someone who writes books about playing football critiquing the team that plays football and wins at football saying, well, they're not playing football properly. That's very much what it's like. That, like, it's all well and good that you sat down and you've written a bunch of diatribes and you've thought really hard and you've created a bunch of philosophical positions and you've created a lot of interesting scenarios and interesting things on this page, and you've written about them and you sent them into the world for discussion and all of that, and that's very interesting. But the truth is that when you take all of that and you do it in the real world, no one gives a fuck. That's the hard truth. Is that once you begin interacting with the real world, your theories and ideas and philosophies and all of that, shut the fuck up. To put it as simply as possible, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face. I would argue that the USSR did very well for itself when it was actually interested in being a communist country, and failed because it stopped being interested in being a communist country and was wooed by neoliberal capitalists into becoming a neoliberal capitalist country. And I think that China has done very well for itself, and that the dangest market reforms and the introduction of foreign capital into the society does not countervail what the communists were talking about and what Marx was talking about, but rather just accepts the existence of systems in the world. Like, if you honestly expect to run a society on pure communist theory, yeah, you will fail. Like, you will. Like, honestly. Because there just comes a point where you've got to look at what is going on in the world, look at what is happening, and ask serious questions and have serious answers. And if all you're going to do is look at a book that was written 100 years ago, well, then you're going to be a loser. Straight up. Like, straight up. What, Deng's market reforms shouldn't have happened? They shouldn't have gone through with allowing foreign capital in. They shouldn't have built their country up. They shouldn't have used that capital to build all of these cities, to build all of this infrastructure, to lift all of these people out of poverty. They shouldn't have done any of that. I don't know. I think it's a hard position to defend. I think it's a hard decision to defend, and I think the only people who would attempt to defend it on the communist left would be the people who spend more times in books than in real life. That's all. They think there are authoritarian ideologies and non-authoritarian ideologies, but authoritarianism isn't an ideology. It's states' response to pressure. Well, and more and more and more, as I get older and as I see when the word authoritarian gets used, I generally see it as when a culture creates a rule and then expects it to be followed. That's what is meant by authoritarian. That if the People's Republic of China pass a law, they expect that law to be followed. And they expect it to be followed even by the rich. And so that's authoritarian. That seems to be what is meant by authoritarianism. Because I don't really understand what that means, authoritarianism. And I feel like here in the West, we live in a society that is so bereft of law. There isn't really a consistency of law. There isn't really a legal structure anymore in America that matters to anyone. It is reverting into kind of a Wild West sort of a thing. That there is like a series of gentlemen's agreements, but the laws that apply to the poor don't apply to the rich, right? Like, the rules don't apply to everyone. And they've made sure that most laws can be paid off with a fine. And so there are two legal systems. And because we live in a society where the prevailing ideology has been let chaos reign, it has been basically just allow chaos to exist. And that is what will make the decisions. The free market will decide by letting chaos reign. Then when we look at a society that says this is a law that we have passed and we expect everyone to follow it, then we say it's authoritarian because we're so far off the map. Like, we don't even create laws anymore. Like, we don't write laws. We don't pass legislation. Like, take a look at what's been going on in the United States for the last 20 years. The only legislation that gets written up and tabled and passed is if it's tax cuts for the rich, or to erect institutions of oppression, like Homeland Security, or Biden's white supremacy task force, right? So if it's like a law and order bill, that'll get passed. But, like, American society doesn't really pass laws anymore. There isn't like a legal, like, everything has just fallen into total atrophy. And things can't just get done. Nobody can actually get anything done. And so when you have a society that doesn't have rules, and the rules that it does have only apply to a certain percentage of the population, while another percentage of the population can just ignore them, then yeah, you look at a society that passes laws and expects them to be followed, and you say, that's authoritarian. But near as I can tell, it just means, oh, they passed a law and they expect you to follow it. Authoritarian, like freedom and democracy, are the new liberal white supremacy dog whistles that replaced savage civilization and Christianity. Oh, yeah. That's a pretty good observation. I'd say there's some accuracy to that. Even the U.S. and its total safety had things like the McCarthyist purges, the Patriot Act, 20% of the world's prison population. Now imagine if they were under pressure similar to Cuba. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and funny that, eh? Cuba doesn't have, like, massive detention centers, right? It's not doing, like, big, sweeping purges. Isn't that weird? Where's the Cuban police state? Huh? We hear so much about how oppressive communism is, and Cuba is under severe pressure from external forces. And one would think that when under pressure from severe external forces like that, that it would clamp down and become much more serious. No big gigantic prison systems in Cuba. No. Oh, Cuba has more doctors than Canada has. Not per capita. Cuba has more doctors than Canada has. That should embarrass every Canadian. Like, I don't care your political affiliation. Cuba has more doctors than Canada. It's an embarrassment. Lawnmower Man, good to see you, bud. Westoids can only defend this fuck system with meaningless vagaries and platitudes about freedom and democracy and authoritarian. Yeah, immeasurable nonsense. There are no viable metrics for. That's another really good perspective and another good way of doing it, right? Thanks, Gino. You're right. You're right. Guantanamo Bay, checkmate. You got me, dude. Certainly not there because of the threat of the Empire just going in and destroying Cuba. Right? Certainly not there with the Cubans protesting it. Guantanamo Bay, dude. I feel like the recognition of Guantanamo Bay for me, like the recognition of what Guantanamo Bay actually was, for me, was not the moment, but definitely a moment where I really realized that we are the evil empire. Like, Guantanamo Bay is unforgivable. Like, it's absolutely unforgivable what we've done. And we should not be forgiven for it. That it is not just a stain on the consciousness of America. It is a stain on the consciousness of Western civilization. It's a stain on the consciousness of humanity itself. And we've all forgotten it. It's still operating. They haven't let anybody go. Something I was thinking about while in the shower today. We have all these Vietnam movies, right? There's all these movies that are about the Vietnam War. And World War II documentaries and like just all of this kind of stuff about... And MASH was about the Korean War, right? Like you had this entire series, a well-loved, world-renowned series called MASH. It was about the Korean War. Where's the shows about the Iraq War? Where's the shows about the Afghanistan War, or the Syrian War, or the Libyan War? Where's the shows about that? Where's Hawkeye working on somebody being like, war is hell? Like where's any of this? Isn't that interesting? When I was growing up, I could watch a show about the Korean War. I could watch movies about the Vietnam War. There were characters that had gone overseas to fight in these wars. Seems like every show had a character that was suffering from PTSD from a post-war situation. Where did that all go? Where did that all go? Where's the Iraq war vet suffering from PTSD? Where's the Afghanistan war vet? Why am I not seeing this anywhere? Why are these people invisible? Isn't that interesting? I think that's a very interesting phenomenon that's happened in Western culture. I think about who's invisible in the culture a lot. Homeless people are invisible. And when they are brought to the forefront, it's to show how dingy and scary they are. Right? That's when homeless people are allowed to be in the discourse. When you need somebody to be dingy and scary. Just saw a trailer for a movie about black soldiers in the Korean War. Yeah, neoliberal propaganda, exactly. But again, that's the Korean War, isn't it? Right? War is good if look how diverse our war people are. Look at the diversity of our troops. Right? But again, it's about old wars, the Korean War. I think the last movie I even heard about that was about any of these modern wars was Three Kings. Right? Three Kings with like George Clooney. But I remember watching that movie as a kid and just being like, this is a nothing burger. Like, there's nothing to this. It's just like a bunch of guys running around a desert, not really accomplishing anything. It was sort of like a Seinfeld movie where it was just kind of like about nothing. It's just that it was set there. And then interestingly, now we've just been bombarded with like a Marvel whole thing. And I won't go into the Marvel shit. You guys have heard enough of that. But like, none of those are set in these wars. Like, none of these are set anywhere. Right? Like, the wars themselves have been cleansed from the society. We just don't talk about them. We just don't talk about them. Like, nobody knows what Biden is doing in Somalia. Nobody knows what they're doing in Ethiopia. No one knows what they've just done across Africa. Nobody knows. It's just out of the culture. I think that that's wild. Like, the previous generation literally had Apocalypse Now. It's like an Oscar award-winning film. Like, Apocalypse Now. What are some of the other good ones? In The Big Lebowski, right? John Goodman's character was a Vietnam vet suffering from PTSD, right? Red Foreman fought in the Korean War. That 70s show. Apparently there was already a fascist Marvel production. Something about the Avengers fighting the Flag Smashers. Yeah, the first Rambo movie. John Rambo, absolutely. Absolutely. The movie The Predator. The Predator was about the Vietnam War. Star Wars. George Lucas outright admitted that Star Wars was a movie about the Vietnam War from the perspective of the Vietnamese. I just read Stephen Gowan's book about Korea, Patriots, Traitors, and Empires. If you didn't hate the U.S. before reading it, you will after. Like, I need an excuse. Avengers fighting the Flag Smashers. I mean, you can already see the weird ways that the culture is interacting with the concept of socialism, right? Because they're beyond it. They're in co-opting mode. So in, like, you've got the Joker going after Bruce Wayne for being a billionaire, and the Joker calling himself a socialist, right? Like, these kind of co-options are fairly common. Like, I remember watching, like, a Batman cartoon and having a character show up, and his name was Anarchy, right? And he was just, like, you know, destroying stuff and all this. And when he talked about what it was he was doing, I, like, literally was listening to him, and I was like, oh yeah, this guy makes a lot of sense. Like, this guy's more valid than Batman. Like, Batman's just some billionaire kid going around beating street thugs up. Like, this Anarchy guy is actually fighting for principles. He's actually got an idea. Like, Batman's literally just like, I am the night, and that's it. I'm vengeance. My parents are dead. Ha 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 ha. That's Batman. Exxon, Shell, and Chevron saw over 100 billions in record profits this year. Yep. Yeah, the good guy CIA man shoehorned into Black Panther. Oh, well, the good guy CIA man that they shoehorned into all that Marvel shit. Right? Like, come on. What is the Avengers Initiative? Like, what is this? Like, the Avengers Initiative, Nick Fury, it's a CIA psyop. It's a CIA operation. That's what it is. It's an intelligence operation. That's what it is. Right? And the only time they ever even have a moral discussion about the nature of what it is that they're doing happens in Civil War. And the conversation is, should there be any amount of government oversight or not? Like, that's literally the conversation. Maybe, should we be a group of superpowered heroes that are privatized and can do what we want? Or should the fascist government have oversight? My parents are dead. Batman. Go get some therapy, Bruce. Like, go get some fucking therapy, dude. The body physically recycles itself every 7 years. Every 7 years, you are literally a new person. You are literally a new person. So if you are holding on to a grudge, if you are holding on to something that is older than 7 years, if you haven't let that go or moved on or moved past it or learned to forgive or just forgotten about it 7 years into the future, that means that you are actively spending energy to keep that in place as a scar. You are doing it on purpose as a scar. So if Batman's like 31 Get over it, Bruce. Fucking get over it. Dude, what they did to Bane, I consider what they did to Bane to be treacherous, to be treasonous. Bane made perfect sense. The entire time he was talking, I was like, this Bane guy. Yeah. Are we sure that this isn't a movie? What's the name of this movie? Batman? Are you sure? Are you sure this isn't a movie called Bane? Because this Bane guy, I'm really rooting for this guy. I don't really get this Batman guy and why I should be rooting for this guy. Bane sounds like he's making a lot of sense. And then all of a sudden, in the third act, Bane like pulls back a tarp and goes, and now we will blow up the city. And you're like, why? Why, Bane? Like, everything you were doing made complete sense up until this blowing up the city thing. Why? Why did you do that? And the only reason they did that was so that they could be like, okay, but Bane's the bad guy. Like, that's it. That's the only reason. Is that so in the script, they got to that point, and they were like, I don't know, guys. If Batman defeats Bane, I feel like the audience is going to be like, boo Batman. Like, this is... So, and then Bane kills and eats a baby. No, I can't film that. Bane reveals a nuclear bomb. Like, that's what happened. Like, the whole time I was just like, yeah, Bane, this Bane guy, man, Bane for president. Let's go. You know, Bane, just a kid that had a hard life, who fought his whole life, right? You used the darkness, but I was born in the darkness. Like, I understand where you are coming from. Like, I feel like you are relatable. Like, you are relating to me here, Bane. And they just had to not follow it through. Like, they totally betrayed that character in every way possible. Instead of making him like a tragic villain or even like an anti-hero that Batman like had to put down from a sense, like, because it would have looked bad for Batman to put somebody like this down. I think that people would have disliked it. They had to just make him a lunatic. Like, that's all it was. They just had to turn the switch. Bane's crazy. And that's it. Such a shame. Such a waste. And that Batman trilogy sucked. It honestly, the what was his name? The Inception guy, Nolan, Christopher Nolan. That trilogy sucked. Straight up was bad. Like, I understand why people were entranced by it at the time, because it was this like Batman taking himself seriously kind of attempt. But even the guy that played Batman, his name, I'm forgetting his name all of a sudden. He clearly didn't take the role seriously. Like, he clearly walked into this being like, this is some comic book shit. Sure, pay me $1 million. Like, I don't care. Right? Like, he did. I've seen this guy do some, like, he was great in American Psycho. Like, American Psycho is a masterpiece of a film. And he was amazing in that film. I cannot believe his name has not come to me quite yet. That is so fucking annoying. Come on. Am I gonna have to Google it? Ugh. Oh, that's so fucking annoying. American Psycho. Christian Bale. Christian Bale was brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant in American Psycho. Like, he was perfect. Like, that was and such a powerful film with such a strong message. And so I think it's pretty clear that he took this Batman role and was basically just like, Batman, eh? You're gonna pay me $20 million? Okay. What are my lines? I'm Batman. Is that the voice you're gonna use? Yeah, sure. I guess so. I'm Batman. Like, for real. Like, that's it. He just showed up and he was kind of beautiful, right? And he read his lines, right? They gave him $20 million. And that was it. That was his whole contribution to the whole thing. Like, I don't think he did anything really special. Like, did he even do, like, any kind of impressive stunt or anything? Like, did he do anything that was, like, notable? Something like Matrix or something? Mocked, how you doing, bud? I haven't done the number draw. It's too late. Too late. I don't care about the number draw today. Too bad. Haha, too bad. Although 2 people have said 7 in the chat. So now I'm curious. I'm going to do it just for curiosity's sake. We got 8 people watching. I expect to see 8 numbers. What do we got? I'm in with the 7. That's the reason why I'm doing this. I'm here for the 7.
Here we go for today's number.
If you are watching
it's
and this is your
November
first time,
1,
number between 1 and 10.
2022. 10 balls. Each ball has a number.
Has a number.
Numbers 1 through 10.
We got a 1 from Chino.
Swirl the numbers.
Mocked, you're in with a 7. I think, Cotton, was it you? It was like literally your first comment.
Pick a number.
It's a 7, guys. It's a 7.
Today's number is...
Fuck you with the
3.
3. David Lynch. The Great and Powerful. What a beautiful man. What a beautiful man. Well, Ligandy, we'll give it to you, bud. 3 is half of 8, so you can have it. Yeah, if it wasn't for Heath Ledger's performance in the second movie, I genuinely think that people would just completely flatline on the Nolan stuff. Because the first film wasn't like blow my ass away. It was like an origin film. And at that time, origin films were like all the craze. That it's only now that we've gotten into a point where we're like, stop with the origins, okay? We know who these people are. Like, I don't need to see Uncle Ben die again. I don't need to see that. I don't need to see Superman as a kid. I don't need to see that. I don't need to see Batman's parents get shot in an alleyway again. I don't need it. I know. Okay? Thank you. That's why I actually respect the new Batman movie, The Batman. I was like, okay, good. They just got to it. That we all understand that this guy's parents were killed. Like, we get it, right? He's just like a kid that's basically been abandoned to a giant empty house. You know what I really liked about The Batman, actually? One of the things I really liked is that they actually did accept and grapple with the concept that Bruce Wayne is fucked up. That he's actually psychologically scarred. Like, all of the other Batmans are like, yeah, it's my modus operandi, and we're all just supposed to be like, yeah, that's a normal modus operandi, right? You're totally normal. My parents were killed when I was a little boy, and I can't get over it. That's a normal thing that's normal. In the West, Nothing Is New is on Netflix, and is still 10 out of 10? What the hell is that? And it's 10 out of 10? Oh, in the West, Nothing New. It's just giving me all quiet on the Western Front. It's just giving me all quiet on the Western Front. What are you talking about, bud? Still. What are you talking about, bud? That's hilarious. Okay. All quiet on the Western Front. Okay. What a hilarious misunderstanding. Perfect. Yeah, dude, like, I do think that there is going to be a moment. Like, there's been so much post-World War II movies. Like, so we're still making post-World War II movies. We're still making movies about World War II. Like, Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers was about World War II. And like, this period of time and the wars that were fought over this period of time will have their heyday. They will have their heyday. And they're going to go through the same trajectory. That we are going to see, like, the fascist Like, all of it was justified. We did everything right. And you're going to get like, we're going to see John Wayne again. John Wayne is going to be in these movies. All right, you bastards. We got to go over there and get rid of the Mohammed and these Islams. Right? Like, that's what it's going to be. And we're going to, like, send John Wayne to Iraq. And we're going to go to... John Wayne goes to Somalia, right? Like, and it's going to be like... It's going to be like that. Where we're going to, like, march into Iraq and be like, and then we won. And after accomplishing all of our goals, we left Afghanistan. You know? That's exactly what it's going to be like. It's just going to be a total bastardization of everything that actually happened. And it's going to spread into the society this idea that the wars that we fought overseas were just and good. And we were a pure and holy people for having done them. And then that will steadily fade out into a more, you know, adult kind of version. But will we ever tell the truth? Like, will we ever actually tell the truth of what those wars actually were? I don't think so. Like, I don't think we've ever actually told the truth about the Vietnam War or the Korean War. We haven't really even told the truth about World War II. Like, I remember watching a movie, I forget the name of the movie, but it was about snipers, and it was set in Russia during World War II. And it was, like, ruthlessly propagandistic. It was ruthlessly propagandistic. And the truth about Russia's fight in World War II is, like, completely not understood by the majority of the population. The majority of the population's walking around being like, the Americans won World War II. And I'm like, probably not, bro. Like, nah, I don't think so. Like, just by the numbers. Just by the numbers. How many Nazis did the Russians kill versus how many Russians did the Americans kill? How many civilians died in World War II on all sides? Probably the Russians that won that war, right? It was probably the Soviet Union that won that war, right? Come and See. Here you go. Here's a movie I haven't heard of. Come and See. 1985, eh? A war drama. Wow. This looks horrifying. It is a Soviet film. You got me. You got me, dude. I'm going to watch this. Yeah, I assume it would be very sad. I assume that a movie made about World War II from the Russians, who by and large are the victims of World War II. Like, I don't even know why I said by and large. They are the victims of World War II. Like, if anybody is the victims, I mean, obviously the Japanese, but in many ways the Japanese, like, bring it upon themselves, right? Like, the Japanese fascists betray the Japanese utterly. The Soviets literally are just like, we would like to build a country based on mutual aid and prosperity. Nazis, Nazis, Nazis. That's a tough situation to find yourself in. Saw it recently and was astonished at how incredible the acting and production. Yeah, I mean, a World War II film made in 85? Who's the leader of the Soviet Union in 85? Of the Russians in 1985. I think the Soviet Union is, like, that's right on, that's like a cusp. It's Gorbachev. But he's just in power. He's just in power. Office established. Himself. Succeeded by office abolished. That's funny. That's funny. Hold on, wait a minute. Of Russia before Gorbachev. Yeah. Lenin, Stalin. Melenkov. Khrushchev. Oh, Melenkov had to be in office for like a day. Yeah. Like literally he was in office for like 3 months, 4 months. Because Khrushchev's the more important leader for sure. Yeah, Khrushchev. Brezhnev with the eyebrows, right? Eyebrow man. Yuri Andropov. I know nothing about this guy. I know literally nothing about this guy. And everything I know about Brezhnev is literally like eyebrow man. Andropov. So this movie gets made when there is like a pretty, like not a rapid shifting, but a shifting for sure. I mean, kind of rapid. Like, Khrushchev was in power for 9 years, right? So it's literally like Lenin is in power for a very brief period of time. Stalin is in power for like 20 years, right? Like fucking 30 years. Like it's basically Stalin, right? This guy's in power for a day. Then Khrushchev is in power for 9 years. Then you have like a 15-year thing with Brezhnev. But then 2 years, 3 years, 6 years, and then it's over. Oh, man. So this gets made kind of in a politically tumultuous moment. But I would think that all of the leaders of the Soviet Union would, like, I would think that everybody would want that story told. You know what I mean? Like, I would think that all of the Russians and all of Russia would want that story told. And a war movie from I've never seen a war movie from the position of the Soviets, so I'm getting pretty hyped for this. Actually, I got to tell you, I'm definitely going to try to find this and watch it tonight if I can, because like I read that the director based the movie off his own experiences as a young man during the war. Jesus. So not only is it an important historical story. Not only is it an important historical story, but it's a deeply personal story. Oh, wow. Yeah, I gotta tell you, I don't know what it is about World War II. I think it's because I've seen too much of it. Like, I've seen too many World War II films that it's no longer, it doesn't cut me the same. Sometimes I look at stuff and I go like, oh shit, this is gonna trigger me, and I could feel like this is bad. But for whatever reason, World War II shit, I'm just like, whatever, man. World War II, bro. What, you can't handle like the most devastating event that ever happened in Western history? Pfft, what are you, a loser? You know, I think that it's a combination of that the scale of the event is too broad, so my monkey brain can't get into the like hard depression of it. And then also I think that like that channel of my brain, the World War II channel, is so well like I've seen Band of Brothers, I've seen like tons and tons of World War II propaganda films. Like I just, when I was a kid, I was like inundated with war amps stuff. Like every year the war amps would show up and they would show, right? Like there was just like tons and tons of World War II shit that's just been like in my brain so many times that now somebody's like, hey, watch this World War II film. It's horrible. And I'll be like, sure, bro, let's go. Whatever. Eat some popcorn. Be like, wow, this is really horrifying. You know? I just think, like, there is something about the idea that, like, you can become kind of dead to certain things. And World War II is definitely like that for me. Like, I find it very difficult to connect to it emotionally. Weird, right? Like, fucking weird. Weird as shit. Alright, guys. We've reached the end of yet another one. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're gonna need it.